We figured you were out getting the stones, but it's not looking good.
Yeah. I'll open the meeting for the Commerce Committee, and we'll be starting today. We've got 4 bills we're going to be hearing, and Senator Susie will be introducing Senate Bill 203 relative to state minimum hourly rate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Donna Susie, representing Senate District 18, which is 5 wards in the city of Manchester and the town of Litchfield. And I'm here today as the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 203, which seeks to raise the minimum wage here in New Hampshire, something that is long, long overdue. Senate Bill 203 would provide that the minimum wage would increase incrementally from September 1st, 2022 to June 30th of 2023 to $10 an hour. Then from July 1st of 23 to June 30th to 12, and then eventually to 15 and 24. At the beginning of this year, 21 states across the country, including many of our neighboring states, increased their minimum wages. New Hampshire is now the only state in New England to follow the federal minimum wage, which has not been increased in over a decade. Over a decade. New Hampshire's minimum wage ranges from $5 to $7 less per hour, than $5 to $7 less per hour than each of our other New England states. In fact, we're one of just 15 states with the lowest minimum wage, equaling the federal level at $7.25. We're joined by states like Georgia, Iowa, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Texas, Utah, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. All the New England states except Connecticut, which was already paying at least $13 an hour, increased their minimum wage. Included in my testimony is a look back at all of the New England states and their rates since 2017. As you'll see, New Hampshire is the only state that hasn't made any adjustment whatsoever. Current rates in our neighboring states or in our fellow New England states, Connecticut is $13 an hour, Maine, our border state, at $12.75, Massachusetts, $14.25, Rhode Island, $12.25, and Vermont, $12.55. In some cases, double the rate of minimum wage that we're paying. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced us all to reevaluate the way we look, the way we work, and live here in the Granite State. It's also highlighted some glaring problems, but luckily we can take some steps to address that. The pandemic exposed to us all what workers in low-wage industries already knew all too well. Low pay and financial insecurity are some of the greatest issues facing hardworking Granite Staters, and the ripple effects are far-reaching, affecting our workforce, hurting our economy, and most critically, hurting the people we represent. As the saying goes, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. It's time for us as elected officials to do better by our constituents. It's time for us to ask, what is the value of time? For each one of us, the answer is a little different based on our experience, our age, our education. But the fact of the matter is, there's no one here in the Granite State today that believes $7.25 represents an hour's work. It's antiquated, it's out of date, it's time that we change. And there's a moral imperative here. It really says a lot about our state and what we think about workers and how we value them. Now, there are going to be others that testify that nobody's really paying the minimum wage anymore, that, you know, all of us drive by restaurants with signs that say $15 an hour, and you drive by the same place 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, and the same sign is still there because they still can't find workers. It's because people have reevaluated what time and quality of time means in their life. No one is paying this rate, but by keeping this low rate on the books, it's a black eye for the state of New Hampshire. In a state where we should be valuing work, where we're rapidly aging, where we want to ensure that young people come to New Hampshire to take many of the jobs that we have, many much more high-paying jobs. But having that number on the books says a lot about us and what we value here in this state. So as we work to rebuild our economy, it's impossible to ignore the biggest problem New Hampshire employers and businesses are facing, and that's the inability to attract workers. We are a rapidly aging state, the second fastest aging state, and we're grappling with that workforce shortage and affordable housing crisis as well. So we need to do everything we can to make New Hampshire as attractive as possible. But there's another issue here that we need to address, or we need to at least consider, and that's the long-term savings we stand to deliver to taxpayers by increasing the minimum wage. By failing to pay a living wage, by failing to recognize how important it is to value work here in New Hampshire, we're effectively ensuring that most Granite Staters who work full-time still have the ability to access and remain on government assistance just to get by. Despite what our perceptions may be, the truth is that most recipients of government assistance work or have a family member who works. In fact, 66.6% of recipients across the country either work or are in families where at least one adult in the household works, and yet they qualify for this assistance. The reality is that in our state right now, a person working 40 hours a week at a minimum wage, working all year with no time off, at $7.25 an hour is making $15,000. That's below the federal poverty level, even for a household of just two, never mind providing for a family. It's not enough for people to live on, and it keeps these workers and their families teetering at or below the poverty level. Raising the minimum wage would most directly impact low-wage workers, most who would directly reduce and allow us to directly reduce government spending on the public assistance that they're able to obtain. It's not only the right thing to do, it's a fiscally responsible thing to do, it represents a cost savings to our taxpayers, and morally it's the right thing to do. Just last year, we acted to lower business profits taxes and have been which we cut for some of the wealthiest of our citizens. If we can pass policies to support the top 3% in our state, I don't see why we can't pass a policy to recognize those at the poverty line, those that are struggling to make ends meet. I have to say, sitting before you, although it's a few days past, this bill feels like Groundhog Day for me. I've been fighting this fight for the New Hampshire workforce for over a decade, and I have heard time and time again various arguments from businesses about the concern, even though they're paying more and will continue to pay more, that they don't want to raise the wage. Well, I think it's high time that we really take a hard look at what message we send to workers and to the rest of the country and to anyone thinking of coming here to New Hampshire by maintaining this low wage. It's time to raise the minimum wage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. I thought I'd heard this once before, I wasn't sure.
Groundhog Day, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Senator Gannon?
Just two questions. Thank you. Well thought out, well researched, Senator. Do you have a raw number? Is it like 5,000 or a percentage of the people in the state who are active? Is this just someone 18, 19, 20 predominantly, or?
No, actually
Younger?
it isn't. And the age does vary, but it is a lot higher than teens. But disproportionately lower wage earners tend to be women. They tend to be women who have to support children in their family.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Would you believe, Senator, that I was at the Seacoast at a restaurant and had a conversation with people working there, and they were saying they couldn't hire anyone, even what they were paying. And I look at this, and if I'm at the Seacoast, and I'm a high school kid, and I can drive 20 minutes to Maine and make $5.50 an hour more than what we pay in New Hampshire, or 20 minutes to Massachusetts, making $7 an hour, would you believe I would work in New Hampshire or Maine or Massachusetts?
Thanks for the question, Senator. I believe there are a lot of people that cross our borders every day to go to work for a higher wage. And once again, I would reiterate, it's clear that in many service industries today, they are paying well above the minimum wage. So it isn't a question of increasing it and affecting their cost, because they are already experiencing those costs to employ people at a higher wage. And I would suggest to you, if we think that a couple years out of the pandemic, people are suddenly going to view work as less valuable, I think we would be mistaken. I think that wages have increased across the board. I think they're probably going to stay right about where they are. And we're going to continue to look out of step, and we're going to continue to be an unwelcoming state if we maintain this rate on the books.
None other? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much.
And Joan? Peugeot? Oh, just supporting. Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Henry Beatty, and I'm here on behalf of the New Hampshire Lodging Restaurant Association. And really just here to speak about the tip wage portion of this bill. The tip wage often gets lost from the whole discussion of minimum wage. And this bill would basically undo what this legislature passed, the governor signed just back in June, 7 months ago. So we would oppose that. However, I do have to give a shout out and kudos to the sponsor for not proposing to repeal, not proposing to do away with the tip wage altogether. I think the senator, the sponsor, recognizes the value of the tip wage. And over the years, has sponsored similar legislation to keep the tip wage intact. Different versions. One year it was raising it at $4, which was the closest that I got. And then it was 35% of the applicable, and this bill is 45%. But I do want to show appreciation for at least recognition that the tip wage has a purpose in this whole discussion. With that, I want to go on. Oh, sorry. Let me start all over again?
Yeah, please do.
No. I'll take any questions.
Questions? Thank you, Henry. Kevin Daigle? Oh, he wasn't speaking. Curtis? You're not speaking. And Bruce?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. My name is Bruce Berkey. I'm the State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business. And we are here this morning to oppose Senate Bill 203, which would raise the minimum wage in New Hampshire. NFIB is generally opposed to state mandates and artificial thresholds. And we regard this as an intrusion to the business operations that owners are engaged in on a daily basis, and this applies to compensation rates within those businesses. NFIB New Hampshire and its 1,400 plus members believe in allowing the free market to determine wage levels and relations in general between employees and employers. Companies in New Hampshire are establishing new higher wage rates all the time in order to attract the employees they need to be successful. With some companies announcing $15 per hour wage rates and higher, competition for workers in New Hampshire is strong, and employees across the board are benefiting from this healthy economy. There are consequences when you have these artificial thresholds and artificial rates established. And oftentimes, employees suffer as a result of those consequences. There can be fewer hours offered to those employees, perhaps fewer people being hired, and it gives incentives for business owners to transition to automated processes. And so, again, reducing opportunities for employees. And finally, the last issue, when you have an artificial or established rate, mandated rate like a $15 wage, it impacts the existing employees who are making maybe $14 an hour or $16 an hour, because there's an upward compression on those wage rates. If the minimum wage became $15 an hour and I'm making $16 an hour, I'm all of a sudden going to be saying to the employer, hey, I ought to be making $22, $23, $24 an hour. And so the artificial nature of this threshold needs to be looked at closely, and we would urge this committee not to move forward with Senate Bill 203. Happy to try and address any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions? Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Wouldn't you agree that there are few businesses today that are actually paying $7.25?
I would agree with that, Senator.
And what do you think it says for some of your members or potential members that a state doesn't view value in time that people work on an hourly basis? That this threshold is the federal threshold. Don't you think it sends a bad message?
I think that, I'm sorry.
Well, don't you think it sends a bad message for New Hampshire?
I think the message needs to be developed between the employer and the employee. And in today's economy, I think that message is resulting in higher wage rates for the employees. And because the employers recognize that value that they need to pay in order to attract and maintain their employee base.
Thank you.
Any others? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathy? Kathy, stop. She was.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for hearing my testimony. My name is Kathy Staub. I live in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I am a member of the Raise Up New Hampshire Coalition, which is a coalition of faith-based labor and grassroots organizations that advocate for working people in New Hampshire. I have submitted my testimony by email yesterday because there were some links to articles and so forth, so I hope you all received that. If not, maybe I'll send it again to the chair just to make sure. The last time New Hampshire raised the minimum wage, John Lynch was governor. It was many years ago, and I think that, I think I wasn't in the room for the testimony, but I know that you've been told that New Hampshire is an outlier in terms of minimum wage in New England. Every other state is at least $5 an hour higher. And I think that this is a detriment to us. Last year, we lost 19,000 workers from our workforce. And in the third quarter of 2021, our economy shrank by 3.3%. So I don't see that this is an advantage to us. We know that people are leaving the workforce. We know that people are struggling. Housing costs are ridiculously high. It's, if you've got a low-wage job, it's really difficult for you to keep and maintain housing. And so And, you know, housing is, you know, when you talk about what's required for survival, it's food, water, and shelter. And so, you know, if people can't afford a place to live, they can't live and work in New Hampshire. You probably will also hear today that because we have a 2.6% unemployment rate, which many economists would say is not sustainable, it harms the economy to have an unemployment rate so low, that wages are going up, and indeed they are. But as I said, you know, housing costs in particular are also going up radically. And you'll also hear that, well, everybody's already making $15 an hour. I don't think that's true. I have not seen data to support that. I think that there are still plenty of people that are making less than one would make in any of the other states with, you know, like Massachusetts, the minimum wage is $14.25 an hour. Even if you take out the 5% income tax, they'd still be making $13.54 an hour. And I would guess that there are a lot of people in New Hampshire who are making less than that. But if everybody is already making $15 an hour, why don't we make it official? Why don't we stand on the roof of the State House and say, hey, workers, come back to the workforce. We guarantee that you will make at least $15 an hour, that you will be able to sustain yourself and your family, put a roof over your head, live with dignity, not need to rely on social programs to help you feed your family and put food on the table. So, you know, New Hampshire is a great place to live, but only if you have enough money to do it. And I think we really need to focus on the people who make our world go round. We saw during this last pandemic that the people that we relied on most are some of the lowest paid people. You know, my grocery store was open because people who make not very much money went into work every day. And a lot of them don't work full time. So, you know, they struggled, but they had to go into work. Home health aides also don't make a lot of money. And they went out every day. They went to nursing, you know, if they worked in nursing homes, making sure that people had food to eat that day and that they were taken care of. They're not making enough money. And we rely on them. They're important to us. They're important to our economy. And I think that you should definitely support this bill and have.
On Senate Bill 203. Sir? Come up, introduce yourself.
I didn't actually come here for this bill, but having sat here and heard what it's about and the testimony, I had a few thoughts that came to mind. I figured I'd share them with you. Thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity. Appreciate it. As a person who has worked...
Could you just state your name for the record?
My name is Dave Kirsch. I live in Hill, New Hampshire. As a person who's worked an hourly wage most of his life and started out with a minimum wage while in high school, I can tell you more money never hurts. Okay? Now, it's simple economics here. Person gets paid more money. They spend it. They pay their money. They pay their mortgage or their rent on time. That's money that gets circulated through the economy. They buy food for their family. That's money that gets circulated through the economy. They buy new clothes for their kids. That's money that ultimately gets circulated through the economy. If they have some extra money, they might go out to dinner or see a movie. More money circulating through the economy. What makes an economy strong? It's the money circulating through it that continues to circulate it. That is how you build a strong economy. That is why in the past the federal government had given us stimulus checks to keep money flowing in the economy. Now, we've heard that about how raising the economy, raising the minimum wage creates this bubble of pushing up. When I worked a minimum wage job, and yes, this was a long time ago, I asked the boss for a raise. He laughed. He said, no. You know, bosses aren't forced to raise a person's pay just because the minimum wage goes up. If they choose to, that's on them. The state should not be responsible or feel responsible for that. Having this minimum wage raised right now does put us in line with the majority of states in this country, and I think, pretty sure, we'll see other states follow suit as well. it's kind of an embarrassment that we would remain so low, honestly. And if companies are already paying more, then yeah, like the last lady said, let's make it official, you know? Because the minimum wage is a flaw, a absolute bottom line. And there are people making minimum wage in this state. People who clean our offices and our homes. People who work in nursing homes and clean our bedpans. I mean, these people do make minimum wage. And these are the people who help maintain our standard of living the way it is. And, you know, I just, to not pass this, it's just an insult. It's an embarrassment. It's an insult. It's a slap in the face to everyone who's coming up. And no, it's not all just teenagers and kids in college. There are people who are in their 20s and 30s who are stuck in minimum wage jobs because they don't have the education and the resources to be able to advance into more higher paying jobs. And then there's the fact that we also heard about the impact it has on social services and aid to this country, to the state. Again, if people have more money, they're not going to come to the state, and that's going to help keep taxes lower. And I'm pretty sure we're all pretty keen on keeping taxes lower. Honestly, I think passing this is a no-brainer. And I hope you all feel the same. I'm available if you have a question.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Gannon.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I have a 14-year-old. She wants to go bus tables in Hampstead at a local little cafe. I'm not keen on that because I want her studying more. But we'll probably let her do that on Saturdays. But it's $7.25, just clearing for the waitress so she can be quicker. If you double it to 14 or 15, do you think maybe they won't hire her because it's a training wage? She can't do the register. She doesn't know how to cook, do anything. She can't wait the tables. She's just doing a real basic function. Are you going to take her job away by doubling that wage? Because it won't be worth it to the employer then to hire someone at a training wage.
That's not true at all.
Okay.
That's not true at all.
Okay.
I mean, if you have a position open that you need to fill, and a 14-year-old comes along, you know, and you don't see other people coming along, then you're going to hire that 14-year-old. I was working in a restaurant when I was a teenager. That was my very first paid job, you know, and I was paid minimum wage. And if the wage went up, I'd get more. My second job was working at a bowling alley. And during that period of time, minimum wage went up. And I got my little raise as a result. I didn't lose my job. I didn't have somebody come in and the boss say, you know what, it's not worth it for me to keep you at this rate. You're just not worth it. Do you honestly feel that your little girl is only worth $7.25 an hour? Seriously?
To start, yeah, I would say the first month or two, all my kids started at those type of wages. By 18, they were making $20 an hour.
Well, because I started at $3.25 an hour, maybe everybody should be starting at $3.25 an hour?
You answered my question. I'm happy. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak on Senate Bill 203? We'll bring up Senate Bill 210 with the prime sponsor, Senator Bradley. Good morning, Senator.
How are you?
Doing fine.
Good. I know there are a lot of people in the hall.
A few.
So we'll have to accommodate them. So let me start out by thanking the co-sponsors in Senate Bill 210. I think you are, Mr. Chairman, one, Senator Gannon, Senator Susi. Thank you very much for that. And for the record, Jeb Bradley from Wolfboro. You know, this is a pretty simple bill, but it's apparently drawn a lot of attention. And the attention has been focused on the fact that it's an anti-ROC or resident-owned community bill. And I'm going to say right from the start, nothing bill. And if you're already a resident-owned community, a ROC, it will have no impact on any existing rocks. So, let's look at what the current law allows for the transfer of a manufactured housing park. Under current law, an owner must notify the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority of their intent to sell. That's right in the law. And there has to be a 60-day period that the owner interacts and gives tenants or tenants association an opportunity to buy the land that their homes sit on. So many times, ROC New Hampshire, an organization that works with manufactured housing park residents, they will try to form an association that makes an offer and then, if accepted, receives financing from the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. The purchase hopefully goes forward, it's completed, the association becomes a resident-owned community, the Community Loan Fund provides technical managerial expertise. It's all supposed to be good, and it often is. However, last week, you'll probably remember these folders. I hope you all had a chance to read them over the weekend. It doesn't always work the way it's supposed to work. And Senate Bill 210 is before us today to rectify the very real problems that these people at great courage testified to last week on your bill, Mr. Chair, and they're here again today. So the first change is to make sure that a notification goes to the Manufactured Housing Association. And that's pretty simple. It's meant to ensure at the beginning of the process that an owner, by notifying the Manufactured Housing Association, is in full compliance with the law. I don't think there's too much opposition to that. But what's also happening is, as a result of some of the problems that these folders represent, the Manufactured Housing Association gets brought in after the fact when it's too late to intervene. Bring them in early in the process. The second change is that the words tenants association are deleted from the statute, or that's the proposal. So a tenants association sounds fine, it is fine, except the rest of the story is these tenants association charge a membership fee. And we heard last week in one particular manufactured housing park it's $300. And you have to be a member in good standing and having paid the fees in order to vote on whether you should become a resident-owned community. I would submit to you that that's very exclusionary and it's problematic. And the third change is the one that seems to have generated most of the discussion, is the change in threshold. Currently, right now, all you need is a majority of the association, and it could be, as I'll get to in a moment, just a majority of a quorum of the association to go forward with a ROC. This would change the threshold to 51%. And I would say and submit to you that you form a broad foundation of support for a resident-owned community as opposed to a minority-run association that obligates the majority into something that they may or may not think is a good idea. So we heard from these folks last week, Fairview Crossing in Allenstown. So the process worked like this, as they've described to me, and I would ask, Mr. Chair, that some of them are here, led by a Mrs. Rideout, who I've spoken to and you've spoken to, that they're able to testify right after me. This is what they told me. There are 300 homes in this Allenstown park. The membership of the association was 102 of the homes. When they went to their meeting, 68 of the 102 voted in favor of proceeding with a resident-owned cooperative. 32 voted against and 2 abstained. That represents 22.6% of the residents dictating and obligating to the majority what their financial future is going to be. And that's why the problems that are outlined in these documents exist. Now, it's interesting, and I'll give you this, here you go, Aaron, maybe pass these around. Minutes of a meeting prior to that vote where Rock, New Hampshire told the residents that under their bylaws, they had a membership of 80 at that point. Their bylaws required only a quorum, which was 1/3 of the 80 members, or 27, and only a majority of the quorum to vote to proceed. So conceivably, at that point, it could have been as few as 14 members obligating 286 members that their financial future was going to be dictated in a resident-owned community. And therein lies the problem. The problem is not with rocks. The problem is not trying to make affordable housing. The problem is a broad coalition and no exclusionary practices. So, you have to go back to a different statute. It's 301A2, which allows as few as 5 people, provided they're New Hampshire residents, to form a not-for-profit association. And that's how this works. So in theory, you could have as few as 5 people trying to form a resident-owned community. So what happened in this case that we heard in Allenstown? And I would have to say that these are the folks that came forward. We also heard from community in your district, but there are others out there. And people are afraid of retribution, so they're not coming forward. So folks like Mrs. Rideout should be saluted for their courage to sit here in front of us and tell us what happened to them. So in the case, and here, Aaron, here are the documents on this. This is a closing sheet from this particular purchase. 68 affirmative votes obligated the balance of this manufactured housing park to go forward with a $20.7 million financing package to purchase the land. Of that, there was a 1.5% fee for managerial and technical assistance that went to Rock and the Community Loan Fund. There were three mortgages actually. The first was from a bank at 4.85%. The second was from the Community Loan Fund at 5.25%. And the third was also a community loan fund. And I haven't exactly figured out how that one worked, but the first community loan fund mortgage was interest only for 10 years. And when you combine that with the technical fee of 1.5%, there's a lot of costs that are obligated to these members, only 22.6 of which voted to proceed. It's $69,000. That's a big financial obligation, and that is exactly what this bill seeks to correct. A majority of residents should determine their future, and residents should not have to pay to vote on their financial future. So the whole purpose of this is to broaden participation, which leads to greater consensus, first about whether to proceed, and then about the management, once you are a resident-owned community, of the park. The very problems that were delineated in all of the information that we were given last week. That's what the bill seeks to do. Now, you're going to hear, because we've all gotten the emails, that if this bill passes, the sky is falling, that it will doom affordable housing. That's false. Categorically false. Listen carefully to Mrs. Rideout and some of the other residents who came here. They're the ones that are asking me, and those of us who co-sponsored this bill, to move forward with this bill. And they're asking because of what happened to them. I will submit that it's going to force Rock, New Hampshire and the Community Loan Fund to work a little bit harder to get that broad coalition. No argument there. But when you want to build a good foundation, you need the broadest possible support, especially when you're obligated to a sum that in this one instance was $70,000 or almost $70,000. And I think if you look at the closing sheet, you'll come to the same conclusion that I did. The resources are there to do the upfront advocacy for a resident-owned community because of the 1.5% fee, and then the ongoing technical expertise when you have that foundation of a resident-owned community. No, the sky is not falling. The other thing that's noteworthy is if you want to borrow money from the Community Loan Fund on the structure, on their website, that mortgage rate is 8.9%. So clearly the resources are there to move forward with this. I would also tell you the 51% threshold is the same as current law that wants to raise the land fee by more than $15. There's an opportunity for mediation. You have to sign a petition of 51%. Well, if it's good enough for mediation for an increase in the land rent, it's certainly good enough for an obligation, as I've cited, a $70,000 commitment to purchase the property. You will also hear that you don't need majority participation because eventually everybody becomes a member of the association, even though they have to pay. And in the instance of we had described to us, $300. What you're not going to hear, except from me and Mrs. Rideout, is that if you don't pay that membership in the association, you will pay $200 more per month of your land fee, or $2,400 per year. I think I don't need to discuss how bad that is. It's bad. The last thing that you're going to hear this morning is that those of us that support this bill, we're opening the door to hedge fund investors and private equity investors to come in and swoop in and purchase manufactured housing parks, raise the rent, and suck out the cash. I would actually argue that the opposite is true. In their own documents opposing the e-blast that we've all gotten, opposing this bill, they cite the fact you don't need majority participation because in the last several months, 14 associations have tried to be formed and they've been rejected by 9 of them. Well, I ask the question, why is that the case? And is it possibly the case that the word's gotten out that the costs are high of resident-owned, the technical expertise, as is outlined in these documents, has not been very good, and there's a fear of minority-driven processes that has led to 9 of these efforts being rejected. And if they continue to be rejected, I would submit to you, Mr. Chairman, that that opens the door to the eventuality that private investors, which has happened in other states, I've found no evidence that it happens in New Hampshire. That could be the case, but I've found no evidence of it. We know it happens in other states, but if they don't proceed because the process is so flawed, that opens the door to private equity investors. So let me just conclude because I think this bears repeating, that this is not an anti-affordable housing bill. It's not an anti-rock bill. In fact, I think that all of us, or most of us, have signed on to Senate Bill 400, the so-called Affordable Housing Toolkit Bill, which is in a different committee, and I think is going to go forward, as well it should. And those of us who've been here over the last 2 budget cycles, we have dedicated, on a bipartisan basis, $50 million to the Affordable Housing Fund, as well we should. It's a great investment, and I hope we can do more. So the members in this legislature, certainly in this Senate, that have sat in these seats, recognize the importance of affordable housing and recognize the importance of rocks. But the process to getting there is deeply flawed, and it needs to be fixed. And that's what this bill does. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. It's been stated a few times that I was a co-sponsor on this bill, but my name's not on it because I wanted to hear the bill before making a decision. But I do have a question. So when these associations enter into an agreement by vote, are they not matching a private offer on the park at that time?
Well, the whole point, as I understand it, is they proceed with the offer, and you have that 60-day period. And so the owner sets his or her price, and then there may be some negotiations, and then there's a final price, and then the financing package gets put together. But you have to have the vote of the, quote, association to move forward. And the association can be, as in the case of Bearview, a minority, and in fact, a distinct minority of the residents, and that is the problem.
But isn't the negotiation done between 2 other parties, a private buyer and the park, and then once that negotiation is reached to a price, then the association has an opportunity within 60 days to meet that price?
And that could be the case, but it's I think what triggers it is the intent to sell.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Senator.
You're welcome.
Now, we got cut off the other day on another bill, so I think I've got the sheets here. We have a lot of people wishing to speak today. I would like you to keep your remarks to, say, 4 or 5 minutes to start with. If we have to cut it back from there, we come up with your group.
Thank you, Senators. Thank you, Senator Bradley. Thank you all for co-sponsoring the bill. And when I reached out to some of you, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciated that.
Could you hold off just a second, because we got a few gonna join you here. Bill, use your pen. Pull right up a seat there, okay. Could you just state your names for the record?
My name is Louise Rideout, and I live at Fairview Crossing Cooperative in Allenstown, and I support Senate Bill 210. Do you want to say your name?
Good morning. My name is Bonnie Goris. I reside at Bayview Crossing Community Co-op, and I support Bill SB 210.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I'd like to touch on a few things that hearing Senator Bradley present the bill was really my sentiments also, because I'm here on behalf of many residents who are too afraid to appear here today. They are afraid, already facing retaliation from neighbors, some neighbors, and they are fearful that there will be more to come because of our efforts today. Our park has 300 units, and we became a resident-owned community in July of 2019. Most of the people in the park are low income and on fixed incomes. We had to pay at least $10 of the required $300 membership fee in order to vote to purchase the park. I continue to pay off the $300 membership fee. Only 22%, and please hear this, of the paid membership, because you had to pay to vote. Not the entire park, was enough to allow the purchase to go forward. No one should have to pay to vote, and more residents should be involved in the purchase process. And if the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund is really trying to promote resident ownership, there should be a requirement that 51% of the residents approve the purchase. After the park was purchased, if you haven't joined the association, as Senator Bradley said, you cannot vote on future issues, and you have to pay an additional $200 a month in lot rent. That right there is like ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. We're required to pay the lot rent to pay the bills, which Senator Bradley, the $70,000, that's per month that we pay, per month on our bills. And that our only revenue comes from lot fees that every resident has to pay. We are paying a predatory interest rate on our multi-million-dollar mortgage. And I do believe it is predatory. The New Hampshire Community Loan Fund got a $270,000 kickback when we purchased our park. Please examine their true intentions. We were overcharged by the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, and they are underperforming in the service that they promised to us. And I question, why is the lender fighting this bill? Follow the money. Who makes money from these purchases? We're the people that have to pay the loans back. We're in debt almost $21 million for low and fixed income. That's a lot of money. Why, and if the Community Home Loan Fund spent as much time building a strong majority coalition of residents to purchase the park as they are spending to lobby, as is evident past those doors, against this bill, they would have no problem building a strong majority to purchase the parks. So you want homeowners to be involved. You want them to be there. You don't want, to me, that there's no way that they care, Community Home Loan Fund cares, whether enough people are going to understand what they got into. They don't care. It's very evident. From my testimony last week and what I presented, I think that it's very evident that their lack of caring and concern. And just to note that somebody from Community Home Loan Fund came up to me, and it's the same person that I've sent so many emails to that has never responded to me, but I didn't engage with her because you don't want to respond to my emails. Why are you coming up to me now? So I left it at that. I didn't say anything. So this is, to me, this bill it's a no-brainer. And I'm very sorry for anybody that was contacted supporting this bill in the legislatures that had people, lenders and other people, giving you a hard time about a process that is actually a democratic process for us. And why are we being denied that? We should not be denied that, and I give you all the courage. And like I said, don't worry, because at the end of the day, if this bill goes through, you can assure yourself that you've done the right thing for a lot of people. I thank you for your time to listen to us.
Thank you.
You ready for me? Oh,
Sure.
I'm not going to cry today. Good morning. Again, my name is Bonnie Gories, and I reside at Bayview Crossing Cooperative, and I support SB 210. I would like to know why an organization that promotes affordable housing is paying the fees for their employees to be lobbyists against this bill. It seems to me that they are using my money that I pay my mortgage through to fight against me. Also, after making the purchase of my home, which is a large expense, and the lot rent fee, I am hit with a $300 co-op membership fee to be able to vote on matters in the park, and if I choose not to pay the additional $300, an additional $200 fee will be added to my park rent, totaling $764. This falls short of affordable housing, and that does not even include my water and sewer bill. To me, this is a form of extortion on a low level. They also do not pay any interest to me on the $300 fee. So if I sell my home, I only get the $300 back. I don't think that it's right that they have close to $90,000 collecting interest in perpetuity, and they keep the interest and do not pass it along to me or anyone else that leaves the park. What do I get for my $300 in lot rent? I get a co-op that is in technical default. In fact, I might want to add that we just got a notice yesterday that we are in default for the second time by Community Home Loan Fund. Due to Community Home Loan Fund not giving the technical support that we are being paid monthly to get. If they follow through with their duties, this default would not have occurred. They get 1.5% of the purchase price plus another $2 per lot for technical training. It makes me think that they have done so that they can enforce the default clause in the loan agreement that would raise our interest rate on our loans by 4%. One reason there is not a lot of support from the residents of the co-ops is the fear of retaliation. And the other is that we found out about both of these bills, SB 324 and SB 210, as a fluke. The only thing that some folks had heard about was reading articles in the newspaper. Most of the folks in my co-op are elderly and did not either read, or if they did not understand the impact of these bills that would make them members of the co-ops if not passed. In closing, I would like you to seriously consider passing these bills to make sure people like myself that are low income are able to keep their homes. Thank you.
Thank you. So reading Senate Bill 210, how would that affect your existing association?
You want to answer that?
Well, we are the aftermath of this bill not being presented and nothing followed in July of 2019. We had nobody to help us. So how does this affect us? It affects us because future sales of mobile homes in the state can strengthen all of us for the raw communities. Because future sales with better participation of the homeowners, think about how strong that would be for all of us to be able to work together on issues that we might need to address as mobile home owners. And obviously, this bill is kind of too late for us in
Right.
some ways, but you know what?
Better late than never.
Better late than never, and I support and because I was here for all of this, I support any mobile home park that is up for sale that the residents want to buy. I support them entirely, to have a democratic process, to have the majority involved, because it strengthens all of us. And it might be too late in some ways, but think about it. We're all in this together. You want affordable housing? You want us to be able to keep it? This is how we do it. We get more people involved. This is a program that Community Home Loan Fund, to me, promotes, but they only go a short distance. And I personally have, what I've witnessed from them, I feel like they just like to build their portfolio. So that's my personal observations, because I had over 100 emails to Community Home Loan Fund since July that many were not answered.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Not going to get any funding.
Senator?
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Just a couple, I want to make sure I'm clear. You said that if you do not become a member of the association but live in the park, you have to pay an added $200 fee?
Correct, a $200 extra a month on your lot rent. So our lot rent is $564, I would have to pay $764.
If you choose not to
If I
become.
choose not to, correct.
Okay. And then the second thing, and I want to make sure to clarify this because there seems to be some confusion. I've heard mixed messages. When you said you had to pay in order to vote, what was that vote? And can you tell me what meeting that was at what stage in your process that was at?
They had formed a corporation. A few of the residents had formed a corporation. And I'm not sure the exact date of the vote,
It's
but I
fine.
went to as many meetings as I could. I worked down in
can answer
Boston, so and John Murphy will have more information on that. So the stage was before we were a co-op. They were collecting membership fees. They decided, oh, we're going to do it this. And this is with technical support, and I will mention Michelle Supri's name from Community Home Loan Fund, because she was the one present at the meetings, and she was the one that was kind of trying to influence and not be explanatory to us. So that was before. So we had to pay we had to pay beforehand. We weren't even a co-op at that point, and we had to pay. So, and and Community Home Loan Fund was directly involved with everything. And I asked Michelle at one meeting, I said, Michelle, this seems to be a conflict of interest for you. And she said, yes, it is. So go figure what she meant by that.
Could I just ask one additional question?
Of course.
You mentioned the technical support. Was the technical support provided in making the sale? And then what has the technical support been since? Because you said you've now been in default twice.
John Murphy would have better.
Okay,
but the
perfect. I'm happy to wait.
Because
Thank you very
he's
much.
very knowledgeable. Thank you
Thank you.
all for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
I
coming.
didn't cry
Yeah,
yet.
Thank you again.
you will.
I will. I have to sit with someone else to help me read something.
Thank you.
Representative. No? Representative Almay.
Representative Perez was talking to me.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, so we were trying to tell the two.
okay. So, Representative Almay, is Susan here? No? She in the hall?
I guess I've got to be over here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Representative Susan Almy, Grafton 13, City of Lebanon, home of the Muskoma Cooperative. I want to start by taking you back to what I told you last week about the Condominium and Homeowner Association Dispute Board and why we need it. We need it because we don't have a rock to help, and we don't have the municipal association to help. And it is very difficult to form and maintain the governance of a small community, which is exactly why the rock has been working. And before it was called the rock, it's been working for decades now. And the people on this committee, I believe, 50 years ago, provided the law that allows 60 days for the people in a trailer park to go out and figure out a way to put in their own offer so that the land won't be sold out from under them. They won't have to take their trailers, which are immovable, off the land and lose their housing completely. This has been incredibly successful. There are always problems along the way with some associations. That's why we need the dispute board for homeowner associations, which I run one of, and for condominiums. The problem is you are talking about people who are mostly, as people have said, low income, on fixed income. They have found a place that they can live in safety. They know their neighbors. They help each other. But they don't own the land. And when a trailer park owner decides to sell, it's frequently the heir of the trailer park owner who has deceased trying to keep it together. It's sometimes the trailer park owner who has been deciding for years, this is too hard. They haven't done anything about the septic system. They haven't done anything about the electric connections. They haven't done anything about the drainage in the place. There are a lot of things that are wrong with that park, usually, when it goes up for sale. And we had one in Lebanon, which was right across Route 4 from Muskoma Lake, prime territory. It would have been raised. I don't know whether they would have put a commercial building there as well as somebody's fancy house, but a lot of people would have been homeless. I knew a few people from there. I'm not sure who's still there right now, except I had spent a bit of time with the son of a woman who went back to live with her there for a while. They managed to get themselves together with the help of the Community Loan Fund and buy the place. A few years ago, they added a solar array. They now get all of their electricity free, essentially. I think they still may be paying back a bit of the loan. But the problem with the law, and one that makes this an impossible problem for the Community Loan Fund to extend any further in cooperativization, is that you have 60 days from the time that each member of that trailer park learns that the land is going to be sold out from under them. You have 60 days to get together. People who, almost all of them, have had no experience of organizing other people. People that don't understand high finances like septic tanks. People that, including this Community Loan Fund, have no idea what the problems are in that place and what it's going to cost to fix them. So in 60 days, the Community Loan Fund needs to find out that this is happening. They have to assemble a team. They have to bring them there. They have to find people in the complex that are willing to talk with them. A lot of those people are going to be in denial. This can't be happening to us. A lot of those people, like a lot of legislators, find their eyes glazing over when you start talking numbers. And they have to get enough of them together to form a group to argue about this. They have open meetings. Everybody can come. There may sometimes be this $300 fee, but you pay it like $5 when you come in, and maybe you up it to $10 later on but you are paying that over a long period of time. And the Community Loan Fund, I have been helping to finance a fair number of these projects. And the Community Loan Fund only manages to make like it's no interest loans when they have to have extra money because they didn't find that last drainage problem. They only manage to finance those because they go after people who believe in this, who have money, and who help provide for it.
So,
And that's, I think that there is a problem. It needs to be considered. This 60 days is too little for the kind of financial work, including going to the banks, because you can't go and say we're going to do this, but I don't know what the financing's going to be in. It's too short a time. it's also probably about as much time as you can say that the seller can wait. So what else you do in order to reduce the problems that still occur sometimes in places like Allenstown, I'm not sure, but maybe you ought to study that.
Great, thank you. So,
Thank you.
so Representative, you're saying you oppose this bill and feel that fewer people should be making these large decisions. Is that your statement?
That is not my statement. My statement is that if you've only got 60 days, I oppose this bill because if you only have 60 days to go through all of this work, you are not going to be able to do it. And that means you're going to throw all these people out into homeless.
Okay.
And we've got too many homeless already.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Latha, that's what I thought, Manjipudi.
It's very phonetic, Senator. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the committee members. My name is Representative Latha Manjipudi. I serve as a rep from Nashua, Hillsborough County 35, District 35. I'm here with two hats, one as a rep opposing this because of some of the, I'm not going to repeat what my colleague said earlier, but I also here to bring your attention to two testimonies that were emailed to you by Cooperative Fund of New England. One is my son, and the other one is the executive director. And my son just took on the New Hampshire, Vermont Loan Outreach Officer position in Cooperative Fund of New England. And one of the first things he pointed out is, Mom, this is going to affect, but he was here last week in New Hampshire. He straddles between Vermont and New Hampshire, so I want to bring, if I could be allowed to read his testimony that he has and why I oppose, he tried to explain to me.
Yeah, we're just trying to keep everyone to about 3 minutes.
Just two paragraphs, quick one, yes. So you have Micah Josephi, that's the executive director, and Vikas Manjipudi is my son. So his testimony would be manufactured home parks are a critical piece of the housing market here in New Hampshire. With the hard work of community residents and the support of organizations like the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, New Hampshire has become a success story for converting manufactured home parks into resident-owned, resident-controlled community. SB 210, as written, threatens to stop future conversions before they have a chance to begin by requiring the majority of community residents to approve of a purchase before they can make an offer. Many successful resident-owned communities have been started by small, dedicated groups of residents who then grow to include everyone in the community. The proposed change is an unreasonable requirement that only serves to keep residents from making successful bid for their own communities. Please encourage local ownership of housing by opposing SB 210. So in a nutshell, what he was trying to tell me was that it is ownership and cooperative ownership, and this is the other end of American dream, owning your own home and the piece of land that it sits on. So this would affect it. So with that, I close my testimony.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for
Tara.
Good morning, Chairman French, Vice Chairman Gannon, and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. My name is Tara Reardon. I'm an employee of the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, and I've worked in the ROC program there for 9 years. Last week, Senator Bradley had a op-ed piece in the Conway Daily Sun explaining that we are in the grips of a horrific housing crisis here in the state of New Hampshire. Quoting Rick Fabrizio, he stated, "There may be no greater long-term threat to New Hampshire's economy than the lack of diversified housing stock." Senator Bradley has introduced some important bills to help alleviate that, but let's not eliminate a great affordable housing solution that already exists in the state of New Hampshire while we're in the midst of doing that. Senator Bradley had some thoughts about the Community Loan Fund, and I will say the Community Loan Fund is one of the oldest and most successful community development finance institutes in the United States, and if in fact it was the place that Senator Bradley described, I probably would not work there. But I am proud to say for 37 years we've worked with residents to preserve and save their affordable housing, especially thanks to the legislature back in the 80s when they provided the opportunity for residents to organize, buy, and operate their manufactured housing parks and the land under their homes, ensuring those homes are saved in perpetuity, but also to preserve the affordable housing that it represents through their ownership as a not-for-profit cooperative. This is a smart, New Hampshire, homegrown, unsubsidized affordable housing solution that has worked for 37 years. So SB 210 looks pretty innocuous on its face, a simple majority of all residents, not those that show up, but all residents. Right now, we work with a simple majority at the meetings, seems to be working fine, show of hands, majority rules. This vote is taken really early in the process. When residents get a 60-day notice, their first meeting is 3 or 4 weeks into that 60-day notice. There is no cooperative. There is no joining fee. It is a show of hands. How many of those residents want to move forward? SB 210 would prevent nearly every community that I have worked with in the last 9 years from becoming a resident-owned community. That's 37 resident-owned communities that wouldn't exist right now. There's 8,500 households in 140 communities, and every one of you has a resident-owned community in your district providing affordable housing that's there in perpetuity. We're committed to giving low, moderate income people this opportunity to control and own their communities by removing the threat of a change of use of that property and the loss of their home. You don't take your home with you when one of those communities goes away. And against the yearly for-profit rent increases that are the industry norm. We're not opposed to the industry norm. So back to half of all the residents. Consider your elections. How many of us would be elected if it took half of all the people in our town to vote affirmatively to elect us? Probably none. It just isn't that kind of turnout. The reasons for that low turnout in elections is a lot like the reasons for low turnout in the first meetings of these cooperatives. We all know at least the election day a year in advance. These people find out the day of that meeting on fairly short notice, about a week's time. They find out by a certified letter. When you're low income, a certified letter is never good news. It's always something, something's wrong. Never comes in the form of good news. So why doesn't everybody go to that first meeting and vote? There's no fee required. It's a lack of transportation. They're caring for another person. They're working. Our folks are essential workers, service workers, truck drivers, restaurant, retail. They work second and third shift in the county nursing home and county jails. And for some of our residents, they just don't believe this can happen. How are they ever going to buy a multi-million-dollar property? They think it's impossible, so they don't show up. There's another important reason, and sometimes they're afraid. Countless residents have told us they don't dare go to those meetings. I'm sure there's some great manufactured housing park owners out there. I'm sure there's some not so great manufactured housing park owners, but they're landlords and they can evict somebody. Whether that threat is real or not, the residents do believe that, especially if the resident purchase doesn't go through. When you get evicted, it's impossible to take your home with you. You don't want to be on the bad side of a park owner. So for all of those reasons, folks instead get updates from their neighbors. They call us to find out what's going on. They come to the meetings and stay on the sidelines, and they watch while somebody else does the work. And then after the engineering is done, when they've met with a lawyer, the financing is found out, the lot rent is determined, and they know they can afford to buy the community, that's when they step up and they join the cooperative. Membership is open all through that process at any time. And as you've heard, when we get to closing or shortly after closing, there's 100% membership. They're not forced to join, but if they do, they get to vote on annual budgets, rules, rent increases. That all happens by a majority rule of those residents. And in fact, that $200 rent differential you heard from, the residents vote on that. We don't set that. We don't have anything to do with that. The members decide on that themselves. So they don't have to step up and be on the board or do the work, but they all can benefit from that. Is that fair? Absolutely. If people are going to step up and get the work done for the benefit of all, I've heard others claim that 5 people do all the work. Well, that's the New Hampshire law. That's what you see in writing. There's 5 people required to make a corporation in the state of New Hampshire. Are we really thinking about increasing that for low-income people just because they're low-income people? And it takes a small group to complete the due diligence, hire and work with a lawyer, engineering, get the meeting notices out. But more and more folks step up as the process goes on. Senator Gannon nailed it last week in the Senate Bill 324 hearing. He said he belongs to a condo association. As long as it's running fine, he's got no reason to be on that board or show up at those meetings. And that's what we hear from people. They don't want to go to the meeting. We see it time and time again. Interesting, as you've heard Senator Bradley allude, in the last 6 months, 14 groups of homeowners that we've worked with, only 5 are likely to become ROCs. A couple more voted to pursue the due diligence, but the infrastructure was just too bad. They couldn't buy their community. And further, there are plenty of manufactured housing owners who don't want to be in a ROC. They like being owned by an investor and somebody else doing the work, and sometimes they just vote no. They don't want to do that extra work. The 6 Jensen communities, large, beautiful communities here in the state of New Hampshire, all 6 voted to go with an outside Sun Communities investor just a couple of years ago. But there's still plenty of investors buying communities. Patriot Holdings has bought 3 communities in just the last 6 months in the state of New Hampshire. Local park owners have bought in Campton, Dalton, and Epsom during the same time. Residents know a local guy that's going to buy their park. They would just as soon be owned by him. I'm not sure why the park owners are concerned about this. There's still plenty of trading going on the market. And whether it's a resident or an investor, they get the exact same amount of money from the sale. Senator French, you're right. The residents match an existing purchase and sale agreement, the price and the terms. So why are we thinking about bringing this successful program to an end? Are there sometimes disgruntled residents? Of course. And we can try to answer questions and explain the process. We've heard from Louise Rideout a lot. Bearview, unfortunately, is a pretty dysfunctional community right now. One board never likes the other board. That we work with, and we hope, as other communities have in the past, the residents themselves work out their differences, but we don't get a vote in their community. They are messy little democracies, all of themselves. But the advantage of living in a ROC is the members can replace their leaders. They vote for that board every year. SB 210 is not about ROC leadership. It's about the right of manufactured home residents to vote by simple majority of those present to determine the future of their communities. And we at the Community Loan Fund think they deserve the right to do that. We have a local banker who sent us a quote, and I won't read the whole thing, but she said this program is a national treasure. She said they bend and stretch their terms to make these work. And they said not all communities have it easy. Some of them struggle. And with the help of ROC, that they have thus far always carried the day. She said she always wonders why legislation is filed, and she attempts to see what problem this is trying to solve. But she is distressed that they are maybe taking away from New Hampshire residents our need to advocate for them. This is an economic and moral imperative. Please keep this program for our communities. I also need to address the request of the park owners to get notice of a park sale. It's their members that are selling this park, or their potential members if they chose to join their community, their association, if they were interested. I'm not sure why the legislature has to step in and tell them what their own members or potential members are doing. They're sophisticated sellers. And as one of our supporters noted, their website has restricted access, so you can't even determine who their members are. I would hope you would not add that provision to the law. Lastly, let me defend the Community Loan Fund. We somehow are in this because we're making a lot of money doing it. I have never seen an 8.9% loan. The largest rock loan that I've ever seen is at 8%, and it was a totally unsecured loan behind another bank. We started with a loan from the Sisters of Mercy Pension Fund 37 years ago. That's how we got going. The people that we lend money to, child care centers, ROCs, minority-owned businesses, are people who can't access capital anyplace else. And as soon as they are bankable, they go to the bank down the street and refinance their loan. But our loans that we make, the earned income on that, do not cover our costs. We have to fundraise to do that. We provide, on an annual basis, nearly 20,000 hours of technical assistance to our borrowers, and that's why they are successful. I'd ask the committee to find SB 210 inexpedient to legislate, and I would be happy to answer questions or follow up with any additional resources that the committee may want. I would like to submit also for the record letters of opposition to SB 210 that we have from the Cooperative Fund of New England, New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, Dartmouth Hitchcock Health, the Organization for Refugee and Immigrant Success, Rock USA, Prosperity Now, the New Hampshire Planners Association, and the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. The folks from New Hampshire Housing Finance are at another hearing too, and they asked me to distribute their copies of their letter. Lots of things were said about our processes that were misinformation when the testimony was given. In fact, the third mortgage that we have to Bearview is 0%. Because we wanted to help those that community survive. Bank Prov is the first place, and we're the second place mortgagee at 5%. I would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. I have a couple. Can these associations, once formed and once purchased, can they vote to sell the co-op to a private party?
They can, in fact, to do that. Because they're organized as New Hampshire consumer cooperatives, they can't profit from the sale. They certainly can sell it, pay off their loans, and the money would go to another charitable purpose of affordable housing.
But then they can put it back into private hands.
Absolutely. Yep.
And what happens if they default on their loans? If they were to default on their loans, would it go to the first mortgage holder, and then your community loan fund would have to pay off that first mortgage in order to secure your second and third?
You have a couple of attorneys on the committee who have probably done bankruptcy and foreclosure work and retaking of properties. That all depends on the facts of the situation. We will work with one of our borrowers, and the first mortgage bankers depend on us being there in second place to help work with those borrowers. We'll try to work through any kind of refinance or workout that a community may need. At some point, I'm not sure, it's never happened thus far. In the 37 years, 140 are all still successful. But I will say it's an easier workout plan, and I've done this in private practice as well as at the Community Loan Fund. Low and moderate income people pay their rent. They don't want to be homeless. They do not want to use their housing. They don't want to lose their housing. So they will make payments, and that is generally enough to cover their mortgage debt. Sometimes there's some messy finances that we have to assist them with, but The loan documentation for us and all of the first mortgage lenders with us is typical commercial loan documentation. And in fact, the cooperative that the folks join, and again, they set their $5 joining fee. That's not something that we come up with. There has to be a joining fee for the cooperative in accordance with statute. When they have to become a cooperative in order to be a borrower in a commercial real estate transaction.
Thank you. So I guess my first question was the one that I was wondering most, whether they could get out of this at a later date by a vote, and they can by selling it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Questions?
Absolutely.
Senator Gannon.
Senator Gannon.
New topic to me in the last week or two. So you're going to go back to a little more basic for me than Senator Bradley, but question not asked isn't a good thing. So when we have an association like testified earlier, the 288 members, and some of them are residents but not members, how do you feel about their not having a right to vote? That sort of bothers me.
So as an attorney for a bank that has a commercial loan on this, I would expect that borrower to behave in accordance with New Hampshire law. And that includes having membership, having resolutions when they vote on anything, recording votes with secretarial minutes. And in fact, those are provided when they make any, when there's any votes in a cooperative to both the first mortgage lender and us. So that is New Hampshire law, as would be any other association or cooperative. So I don't think that's the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund having like this extra set of rules. It's how commercial transactions work.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
So we've got 20-plus speakers left. I do want to, we'll be timing. I do have to keep everyone to 3 minutes. Steve Saltzman, is he here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you'll be pleased to know that I've already timed my remarks at 3 minutes.
Nice.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thanks for hearing my testimony today. I'm Alan Reitz. I own residential property in Plainfield, and I appear before you on behalf of the Hanover Co-op food stores and auto service centers in the Upper Valley. The Hanover Co-op is a registered New Hampshire cooperative corporation. We were registered in 1936. We have Inc. at the end of our business name, and we pay business profit taxes. I mention that because sometimes the structure and history of different co-ops can be misunderstood. But as a cooperative, it's our view that SB 210 is not suitable. I'd like you to consider the following questions as you reach your final conclusions. First question, what is SB 210 designed to fix or encourage in the marketplace? That's my question. I've heard some answers and different views this morning, so that's helpful. I do see that on line 16 that a future tenants association, such as a cooperative, is struck from law if they're trying to purchase the park, as I read it. So therefore, if 5 tenants of the park form a co-op to make an offer, this bill seems to strike their right to do so, if I understand it correctly. Yet thinking about it more, if 5 neighbors down the street who do not live in the park form an LLC, a limited liability corporation, they can make an unrestricted attempt to buy this neighboring park. If true, I now see through testimony some of the reasons why the tenant association seems to be obstructed, but not the LLC. And I do see that an LLC could certainly dictate future affordability of the park. So I've been wondering what SB 210 might mimic out there. So I reached out to Kate Latour, who's the Director of Government Relations at the National Cooperative Business Association. Ms. Latour knew of no other legislative proposals in the United States that would put cooperatives at a competitive disadvantage in a free market. When opportunity knocks, let us maintain the freedom residents now have to make a cooperative investment in their future and have the chance to pass equity on to their family. When I look at this long list of New Hampshire resident-owned communities, I see more than a list of rocks. I see Granite Staters using a cooperative tool that is older than the United States. To paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, the Constitution, and by the way, Mr. Franklin founded a mutual insurance cooperative in 1752. He states, the Constitution only gives people the right to pursue happiness, they have to catch it for themselves. Please do not put SB 210 in the path of people pursuing property ownership. It's also worth adding that Mr. Franklin's cooperative insured Carpenters Hall, a building and land cooperatively owned by independent carpenters' guilds. And it's that building where the First Continental Congress met in 1774. History demonstrates that a cooperative is a democratic business model that works. I don't think SB 210 would fit in 1774, nor do I see how it works well today. And for the record, Mr. Franklin's insurance cooperative is still in business, and Carpenters Hall is still cooperatively owned. Let's allow resident-owned community cooperatives to continue to work for New Hampshire. Thanks for considering my comments, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you
Great.
very much.
And I will pass out
Yes, please,
my
just give
remarks.
it to Aaron. Dan Rothgeber?
Hello, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Pam Rothgeber, and I live at Friendship Drive Cooperative in Salem, New Hampshire. I serve as the vice president on our co-op's board of directors, and I've lived at Friendship Drive for 11 years. I oppose SB 210. If you don't know where Friendship Drive Co-op is located in Salem, many of you are familiar with the beautiful Tuscan Village development that's right across the street from our 44-home community. The land used to be Rockingham Park, and the condos at Tuscan Village right now are selling for over $650,000. They can keep their condos because I'm proud to live in one of the most affordable places in Salem. I moved to Friendship Drive Co-op for more freedom. I wanted to live affordably, but I also wanted a yard and a garden. I wanted a safe place for my children to play where neighbors knew each other and would look out for each other. At Friendship Drive, members are a mix of families, senior citizens, new Americans, and young people just starting out. My 3 sons recently purchased homes at Friendship Drive, not only to be closer to family, but so they can also experience the American dream of owning their own home while not breaking the bank. Many of my neighbors would be eligible for Section 8 housing if they didn't live at Friendship Drive. A recent income survey in our community revealed that 83% of our members are low to moderate income. But regardless of their income level, my neighbors can own their own home, have their own gardens, and pay a lot rent that is not only affordable, it's set by a membership vote of the cooperative, and not by an owner that needs to make a profit, all without depending on any housing subsidy. I didn't live in the community when the park became a co-op in 2005, but I can vouch for the difficulty of getting people together to conduct the regular business of a cooperative. It's a challenge. Many people have physical disabilities. Hardworking people in my neighborhood do shift work at all hours, and some work more than one job. From my perspective, we should be passing laws that make resident ownership easier for people who are challenged, not make the process more difficult. Given the makeup of my neighborhood, I can't imagine getting more than 50% of the homeowners to attend that first meeting, much less all vote the same way. Although I do know everyone who lives at Friendship Drive is grateful that we are now a co-op. Thank you for giving me the time to speak at this important hearing. I choose to not take any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rich Conrad.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, my name is Rich Conrad. I live in Barrington Mobile Home Estates in Barrington, New Hampshire, and I currently serve as the president of the co-op there. Barrington Mobile Home Estates consists of 79 approved sites, of which 67 are occupied. Like everyone else, variety of residents, young to old, retirees, disabled. Now, our cooperative was formed in 2005, and since that time, we've tried to purchase the park 3 times.
All have been unsuccessful, twice because the owner backed out, and in the last attempt, which was last year, we lost out to Patriot Holdings. They ended up buying us. So having been through this 3 times, I think that trying to get the 51% majority would be almost impossible. In our park, we have, out of the 67 residents, 44 are members. And so that's, what, 65%. We often had difficulty meeting that 1/3 quorum that was mentioned earlier with 44 members. The reasons are pretty easy to understand. You know, it's schedules, it's disabled people trying to get transportation to the meeting, babysitters for the younger people, and single moms. So those are all issues. And the reason that's a big issue is because we don't have an on-site building where we can go and have a meeting. I don't think there's many homes that are big enough to have 44 people in them. So we have to use the Barrington Middle School as our meeting place. So right off the bat, we're subject to their scheduling and their timing. So we can't do what's convenient for everybody. When the pandemic hit, of course, we couldn't use the school. So we had to have our meetings in an open sand pit that's on the property in the evening, which you had to do it before dark. So it made it even more difficult. So this is a very time-critical process. Obviously, everyone's brought that up, 60 days. We were already a co-op. We didn't have to go through the process of trying to become a co-op, right? We're 100% financed. There's all these hurdles that we have to go over, the engineering surveys, this, that, and the other thing. So 60 days is not a lot of time. And then on top of that, you have people that are members that don't go with the flow. I mean, they don't really care, sadly. But that's the fact of the matter. The other thing that I wanted to touch on quickly, which is kind of in response to some of the other stuff, I know Tara had brought it up, that yeah, $300 for a non-member, that is set by the communities. Ours was $25, okay, as a membership fee, and that's to pay for things like mailings, you know, that sort of stuff, and that's all. And we hadn't ever decided that we were going to raise rent on non-members. You know, before we lost our last bid, we were trying to figure out ways that we could generate income in other ways, you know, to help out. So I would hate that you look at this from the perspective of 1 or 2 cooperatives, or, you know, or some small number of cooperatives. There's a lot of them, and they're not all the same story. So in conclusion, I would just ask that you not pass SB 210, because right now these communities need help, not hindrance. Is the system flawed? Maybe. Show me one that isn't. But if you feel it is, perhaps go back and look, and a little closer look.
Great, thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Elliot Berry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Elliot Berry. I'm the co-director of Housing Justice at New Hampshire Legal Assistance, where I've been representing pretty much very low-income people for over 40 years. Let me start by saying that this is hard for me because I have enormous respect for the sponsors who have done wonderful work in this state to advance the cause of affordable housing. And I hope no one will take umbrage from my testimony.
Oh, you shut it off. Could you turn it on? No, at the base.
I got it.
You got it, thanks.
I'm technologically challenged. So, and let me also say, by the way, that in my work, I represent a number of tenants who have problems with co-ops. I don't think they're perfect by any means. But I do want to talk about, first of all, what gave rise to all of this. When back in, I think it was about 1983, don't quote me on that, I got a panicked call from a registered nurse who lived in a manufactured housing park in Milford. And she reported to me that the owner of the park, somebody who had just bought it, is closing the park, and he's going to stick-built condominiums on it. There were 56 homes, and you can't, it's not like you can move the home from one site to another. That community was about to get, and mostly elderly people, was about to get wiped out because of this condominium conversion. Miraculously, we were able to organize and get a community development block grant, and a whole lot of things came together. And we saved that community, which is still functioning very well today as the Souhegan Valley Manufactured Housing Cooperative. But the group of people that I was working with in the park, there were probably 5 or 6 of them. But motivated people, a small group of motivated people, are usually what creates change. When you get to the merits of the bill, and I think that Senator Bradley raised a number of issues that are problematic, as did the residents of the park in Allenstown. But let's look at it, you have to compare this. Let's look at what happens when an investor owns. Do the residents of the park get to vote on whether any particular owner or prospective owner is going to buy the park? Of course they don't. There's a huge operator in Vancouver who owns parks all over the nation, and it's pretty darn remote. A lot of people, if they got to vote on that, I assure you, they would not vote. Do the stockholders of any given corporation who's buying the park have to vote to approve the purchase of the park? No, they don't. And how about comparing the operations? Yes, the co-ops pay a developer fee or a management fee to the community loan fund. On the other hand, the private investor, he usually gets a developer fee. He has mortgages to pay, sometimes blanket mortgages. He gets management fees as much without limitation. And then when they own the park, they often pass rules that are incredibly intrusive, and no one gets to vote. So it's not like one is great, has no problems, and one has other problems, is just filled with problems. There are problems each way. I can't tell you how many investor-owned parks that I've been representing tenants in that the upkeep is horrendous. They don't do anything to deal with environmental problems, and in fact, there was one that New Hampshire Community Loan Fund saved up in Ossipee that had been under orders from the Division of Employment from the Department of Environmental Services for over a decade, and they did absolutely nothing, and the residents have they have no way of doing anything about it. So again, it's not like investors are all bad, but the co-ops they're performing an incredibly valuable function and promoting the long-term security of all of the people who live there. Because that park's never going to get sold and create another Milford situation. They're there for the long term and what so many of those residents want. So at the end of the day, and let me say one more thing about this, and I, by the way, was a co-founder of the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund when we were meeting in the basement of Mount St. Mary's, I guess it was forget what it was at that time, but up on Route 3 in Hooksett. I strongly object to a division of, a rent structure that for members is $200 cheaper than it is for non-members. That's a problem.
and for low-income people. And I am more than willing to work very hard with the Community Loan Fund and anybody else to put a limit on what that difference is. I think it's legitimate to have a difference because the people who are running the park and, you know, the cooperative members and the board are doing a heck of a lot of work on behalf of everybody else, and they are, you know, they need some motivation to get more people involved and have a stake in it. But $200 is excessive. And again, to the extent that there are problems, I'm willing to work with this committee or any other to try to iron those out. So, you know, again, when there are disparities like that, anyway, I could go on forever, and I know you want me not to do that, so I won't, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Questions? Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much. So, do you really believe that a quorum, which is 1/3 of the membership of an association, and a simple majority of that quorum, and you've heard all the testimony today, is the appropriate way to bind everybody else in a cooperative? Do you really believe that, Elliot?
I don't. So let me.
Thank you.
But could I just explain, Senator Bradley? I do think, number one, that at the Loan Review Committee, at the Loan Fund, when those come in, the first questions that I ever ask is what is the level of participation in the prospective cooperative, and if it's too low, I will personally vote against that loan or give the sponsors time to recruit and get more people involved. And I'm not the only one with that. I think, and then the contrast again, is, which somebody already pointed out, is it's the same problem on the investor side, that there could be, you know, it could be one person controlling the whole thing. So again, neither side is ideal, but I think the co-op is preferable.
Questions?
Again, thank you for allowing me to testify, and again, for all the good work that so many of you are doing to promote affordable housing.
Senator Clegg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Robert Clegg, and I'm here in opposition to Senate Bill 210. And I'll tell you why. I said, one of the biggest problems I have is, why do I have to wait, somebody in the park have to wait until they can find 51% of the people, when most of the people who live in those parks are afraid of being evicted? And somebody says, oh, they can't be evicted. I talked to a colleague in the Senate yesterday who talked about his family who lived in a park, and the owner wanted them out. So what he did was he took his bulldozer on the 4th of July, when everybody was gone, and cut a 3-foot deep swath between their house and the storage shed. Basically said, it's only going to get worse. So it happens. Now, I'll tell you for the record, I'm a developer. And I've bought parks. I bought one. But I was a minority owner and didn't have much say about what was going to happen, but I didn't like the results. People lost their houses, had no place to go, and it wasn't right. I'll also tell you that right now, if I wanted to buy a park, I could go buy it, serve everybody with their 18-month notice, and in that 18 months, I can charge them whatever I want, and I can use that time, that 18 months, to make my plans, work with the city and town to make a lot more money than I can off of the units. And that's what we're seeing. If you look at what happened in Litchfield, they decided that, the homeowners decided that there was too much work to do. Here's a facility that, and I'll get these to you, Mr. Chairman, it's had an open lagoon sewer for 20+ years. So when they decided that they couldn't afford the park because they couldn't afford to fix it, they decided that, okay, well, let's let the new guy coming in with some money take the problems, because they saw that their rents were going to go to $580 and they didn't have the money. They were paying $450 at the time. Their rent went to $600.
And I can show you in here where the lagoon still sits there. The sink's still back up, your bathtub's still back up, and the smell is horrendous. So they didn't gain anything. They're actually paying more than they would have if they bought it, but they didn't think they could afford it. I'll also tell you that there are hedge funds in the state of New Hampshire looking to buy anything they can that has to do with housing. I know because I've been approached 3 times by 3 different people, and manufactured housing parks are the easiest to pluck because they're open land, and usually the communities look to do something else that produces more tax income than a manufactured housing park does. But what do you do with the people who live there? I used to buy manufactured housing to put people who had lost their breadwinner in their spouse. We'd buy the old ones, the cheap ones, and let them live there because it was a place that they could go, feel a little sense of pride for still having their own home and not having to live in a shelter or in a tent. These are real people. These are real circumstances. And to turn around and say that we need to make it tougher for them to buy is great for the developer. I want to make it clear, I would never clear out a park again, ever, because I saw what happened. And that's what's going to happen if you put this in. If they have to wait till they get 51%, they're never going to get there because people are going to be afraid of the ramifications if they lose. And you can't move those homes. Well, I guess you can, but try to find a place where you can put it. And try to find who's going to pay the cost of moving it. So when somebody comes in and says, get out, you got 18 months, you lose your home, you lose the place you lived, you have nothing. And the banks will lend you the money to buy those modular homes, they lose out too. So I'm asking you to think about what we did. This has been a situation for many years, and we've always been on the side of the residents. And it's their one shot not to be homeless. And I feel bad for the people who are paying $600 and somebody wants more than $200 more. And I agree with Elliot, which I don't do very often. And I say that maybe if you want to look at that, maybe you should look at that. I'm not for rent controls either, though. But people's cost to live in a park has to be shared, almost like a condo. And as long as the condos run right, nobody complains. So I ask you to ITL this, and if you really think that we need to do something, then let's look at some of the problems that exist. Let's look at the people who sell their parks and don't bother to follow the rules, because built into the purchase and sale is something that says, well, if I get caught, you have to pay the fine. The fine's peanuts. And I mean peanuts. So if you can get away with it, you get away with it, but of course somebody's got to complain. So if you want to do something, let's look at that. Let's make the fine 10% for every 50 people, up to 50% of it. So we're playing a game, a dangerous game. We're playing a game where the developer with the money can come in and look at how many condos he can build, or a high-rise, or little houses, and we're looking at a group of people who've got no place to go when you do it. I don't know anybody who can go someplace and live for $380 or $500 or even $600 a month. They don't exist. And this bill will take those people and put them in the hands of the local welfare offices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Karen?
Good morning, members of the committee, Mr. Chair.
Morning.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. There's been a lot being said about this issue.
Could you state your name for the
Oh,
record?
excuse me, I apologize. Karen Susi. I am here on behalf of the New Hampshire Manufactured Housing Association. I am the executive director. Again, as I started to state, there's been a lot of varying messages coming before you. Certainly a lot of fear, and certainly a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of misdirection being brought forward to you today. So my job here is to bring you back and focus on what the bill actually does. So why am I testing in support of this bill? I answered the phone and tried to provide direction to residents who were not receiving any assistance from the entities that gave them the guidance to move forward with the purchase of these communities. And I think that has been made evident in the hearing that you were at last week. Why has the Manufactured Housing Association allowed me to sit here in support of this bill? Because the actions that are occurring are a black eye to the face of this industry. And the Manufactured Housing Association is the face of this industry. The New Hampshire Community Loan Fund is not the only organization interested in promoting affordable housing. The goal of the Manufactured Housing Association is to someday, and it will be very difficult, make it so that anytime that manufactured housing can be located wherever a traditionally stick-built home is allowed to be located. Now, what does this bill not do? It does not prevent the conversion of privately owned communities into residentially owned communities. It does not prevent the establishment of a tenants association. What the bill does is it includes the New Hampshire Manufactured Housing Association in the notification process. It does not alter the notification process. It ensures that residents do not have to pay to vote. And it ensures that a simple majority of residents be required to approve a multi-million-dollar mortgage. I keep hearing that this 51%, the simple majority, is simply unattainable. The ability to reach the simple majority is absolutely attainable. Back in 2019, the legislature codified a manufactured housing community protection program. That was in place so that if there is a rent increase dispute, and the residents feel that it is unjust, they can petition to participate in the mediation of the program at no cost to them. I have not had one case in which these residents have not been able to reach this threshold. And this is a rent increase. We're not talking about signing onto a multi-million-dollar mortgage. The current practice, the requirement of paying to vote, the requirement to be physically present to vote, that's nothing short of exclusionary. Does the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund understand that by opposing this bill, they are in fact supporting a discriminatory practice? The discriminatory policy was erased by our society in January of 1964 when it abolished the poll tax. I respectfully request that this committee support this bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you, Karen. David Kirsch.
Good morning again. This time I will remember to say my name. I'm Dave Kirsch. I'm here in opposition to this bill. I am the president of the Brookside Cooperative Incorporated. I want to specify incorporated. We are a business. I keep hearing about, and I'm going to go off script because otherwise you'd have to give me the same time you gave those unfortunate ladies in the beginning. And my heart goes out to them. They sound like they've got a really bad situation. It also sounds like that they're looking for somebody to blame for their situation rather than take responsibility for their own bad decisions. This whole thing about needing 50% of all residents is to decide whether or not to form a cooperative. We've heard that the beginning of this process, there is no cooperation, there's no cooperative. It's just a group of residents who found out that their property was going to be sold, probably to an out-of-state investor. Ours was going to be sold to an out-of-state investor. And we thought, you know, what is the motive behind that? Well, the motive is going to be profit, of course. And just like the prior owner, it's always going to be profit over people. That's not what you are here for. You're not here to make sure somebody else makes a profit over people. You're here for the people over profit. That's what we vote and elect you for. So we had roughly 6 of 18 homes show up at that first meeting. Now, that first meeting, there's no cooperative, there's no membership fee. There's just 6 of us who are listening to a presentation of the facts as they exist and what the laws are, provided by a couple of members from the Rock NH organization. And they laid it out. They told us the good and the bad. And they gave us examples of where bad happened and why certain parks never became rocks, you know? And our park is in seriously bad shape, let me tell you. Prior owners, they didn't care. You heard previously about that. Owners who don't really care. They're just, again, worried about profit over the people. They don't respond to needs. We had, as president, I get called when there's a problem. We have an operations manager. I really wish they would choose him. But regardless, we had a woman recently, every single year, the drain system to her septic tank gets frozen, literally freezes. She can't even use her own bathroom. When she called the prior owners, they said, we'll send somebody out, and a day or two later, somebody would come and clear the thing. And then it would freeze again. And she'd have to go through this again and again and again. Because it was about profit over people. We don't, the whole point of a cooperative is people over profit. And why do we need to have a majority of all residents to form a business that will purchase the property? You say, how is it not fair that everybody doesn't get to vote on what the future is as far as how that property is run? Well, because they're not part of the business. Since when does somebody who's not part of a business that owns a property get a say in what happens to that property? I'll tell you now, nobody asked me whether or not I was okay with raising the rate when they did. Nobody asked me if I was okay with them not fixing my septic system when it was needed. Where was my say then? Now a member of the cooperative. As a member, yes, there's a fee. And apparently, as far as we heard, New Hampshire statute requires that membership has a fee. And our fee is $500. And once we formed the cooperation, we all gave $5 toward that fee. That fee is fully refundable, as you heard. It's held in escrow. There's no reason for anybody to expect to get interest on an escrow deposit. All right? We heard that from those poor ladies. Well, so no cooperative that I've heard of charges more than $5 a month on top of the rent in order to fully pay off their fee. We heard about $200 for non-members. Well, that's pretty steep. I mean, as we formed a group once we had enough people, and it took a while. It took us about 45 of those 60 days to get a bunch of people, and I'll try and be short here. And we created the rules and the bylaws within statute. Thankfully, we had people from Rock NH there to guide us and show us what we can and can't do, because there were quite a few things that we thought we should do, and they're like, no, you can't. You know, this is what that fee we pay to Rock NH is for. We don't have the time or the knowledge to be able to research every law on the books. And we don't have the time and the knowledge to be able to find every grant. Right now, we are in applied for some grant money so that we can fix the septic systems in our park, which are failing, to fix our water system, which nobody has a clue. We brought an engineer to try and figure out just how that one works. It was put together piece by piece, you know. We have an abandoned home that the prior owner just let sit there because it's owned by a dead man. Literally, it's owned by a man who died 10 years ago. The town keeps sending tax bills to a dead man for the past 10 years. We asked them if maybe they take the property on tax purposes. They felt it was too expensive to do that. We have no idea what we're going to do about that. We're hoping we'll get some help from Rock and H as far as guidance goes. I'm a little offended that the New Manufactured Housing Authority feels that they represent the face of the manufactured home. They don't represent me. I'll bet none of them even live in a manufactured home, but I do. Senators, I implore you, you are here to represent the people, not the investors who might buy property and do whatever they want, raise the rents however high they want, demolish the park and build whatever they want. You're here to put people over profits. This bill requiring 50% of all residents to decide whether or not to even start the process, and that's what this is about. Just the ability to start the process. This isn't even about buying the place. It's just forming a cooperative, forming a business to look into the possibility of actually buying the park. I don't think that's very reasonable at all. And let me tell you, I knocked on doors the day that we had that first meeting. And half of them, nobody was there. And to a couple more, nobody was interested. In fact, of those 6 homes that came, 2 of them weren't interested at all. They just showed up to hear. But after hearing everything that was presented, they decided, you know what, yeah, this is a good idea.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you very much. So please don't repeat anything you've heard. Keep your comments to 3 minutes. We're running out of time, and I'd like to have John Murphy come up, please.
My name is John Murphy. I reside in Bearview Crossing Co-op. After living here since 1988 and going through the Rancourt bankruptcy, and then the Heinz Group that purchased the park, back then I thought the purchase of the park would be a best option. What I did not like was the fact in order to vote yay or nay on the purchase, I had to join the co-op, pay a $10 fee, and agree to pay either the balance of $290 off at once or in a 5 monthly installments. Every resident of the park was going to be affected by this decision and should have been allowed to vote without having to join the co-op. All voting for any decisions of buying the park should have been offered to all members without the strong-arm tactics of you have to pay first to vote. If you look at the meeting notes from March 6, 2019, it shows that 14 people are allowed to make the decision that affects 280 plus families at the time. Community Home Loan Fund promotes a good idea but fails to follow through as advertised, not providing the technical assistance. They are paid $2 per lot a month, which in our case is $598 a month, to people that have no experience running a corporation and allowing it to go into a managerial default, not because we aren't making the loan payments, but because the non-monetary terms of loan were not met. And to top it all off, there is a 4% interest rate increase on the loans if we go into default. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Okay.
Questions? Senator Bradley.
So, Mr. Murphy, hearing what you've heard on both sides of this debate,
right,
and the need for affordable housing, the opportunity that resident-owned communities present, do you feel that if there were a 51% threshold, that resident-owned communities could not be formulated in the future, and that these manufactured housing parks would revert to private equity investors?
I think 51% might be tough to reach, but I think it's doable. I mean, I got the registered letter in November of 2018. My wife was in rehab for a hip replacement. I think I ended up going to a meeting in December, having to pay the $5 to join the co-op fee. This process didn't finish until about April, when we had the meeting at the Pembroke Academy School. And in order to vote for the purchase of the park, you had to pay that night to be able to vote. A lot of people showed up, but it was only like I think it was like around 100. Something like this, I will do anything that I have to do to show up. I mean, my wife is handicapped, I'm handicapped, but I make the time for something that this important, I will be there. So I can't really give you an answer.
One more question. Do you believe that if a community like yours, when it was first formed for a resident-owned community, had attained that 51%, that you'd have better buy-in among the residents so that you would have better operation of the park moving
I
forward?
think if more people got involved at the beginning, they would have stayed involved, if that's what you're asking.
And
a lot of what's going on now probably could have been avoided.
Okay, thank you.
And I have one question. Were you in support of creating the co-op when this came up for vote?
Yes, I was.
Great.
Because I thought it was a good idea, because like I said, I went through Rancourt, then I went through the Heinz thing, and I thought it would be best for us to buy the property and govern ourselves instead of having somebody else, especially somebody from Canada, telling us what we had to do.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Senator Susie?
Yep. Just one question. There was a lot of mention earlier in testimony about the $200 surcharge for
Yep.
non-members to participate. Did you participate in any of those discussions?
That was done by the board. I think originally it was supposed to be like $25 or $50, and then somebody on the board said, make it $200, and the board voted yes, and that's what it's been ever since.
And do you know if there was anyone from Brock or anyone involved in that discussion that could have said that this was really?
I don't know. They were supposed to be training the board members to do the job the way they're supposed to be done. And obviously, with that second default now, they're not doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Kim?
Good morning, Senators. I think it's still morning. I'll read through this as quickly as possible. I know we're short on time. My name is Kim Capen, and I live at 15 Country Way in a manufactured home cooperative in Goffstown, New Hampshire, Midville Cooperative. I serve on the board of directors of two nonprofit organizations that help manufactured homeowners with resources to purchase and education to govern and manage their community. I serve on these boards because I have seen how investors have displaced low-income families and elderly from their homes, all in an effort to maximize their return on investment. I serve on these boards because I see the injustice the government needs to see as it relates to low-income, unsubsidized housing asset across America. I serve on these boards to give back by supporting the educational opportunities that come from being a cooperative and learning how to govern and manage an organization. Volunteers have told me about being able to add to their resume, have gained more meaningful employment because of the skills and education they got from their roles in governing and volunteering in their communities. Cooperative ownership has many unseen benefits. Perhaps only 30 to 40% of the residents show up for initial vote to make an offer for the community they live in. But after being a cooperative for a few years, it would be difficult to find many who would vote for a return to investor ownership. Why is that, you might ask? Because they now understand what those 30 to 40% understood when they formed a cooperative and decided to purchase the community to retain and maintain its affordability. The rent cost does not have built into it an annual return on investment factor. It doesn't have investors to pay back. They do not have the profit expectation of driving up the rents so that the value goes up for a hefty profit when they flip it. They do not have the concerns of homeowners across the country who have seen their biggest asset, their home, evaporate overnight because over time the property's highest and best use is now something else, and a developer had purchased the property. They have no rights to the land under them. The cost of moving the home is unaffordable, and even if it was not, there is no place to move their home. Manufactured homes today are not mobile homes. They are not easily or affordably moved. Why does legislation like this best support? Who does this legislation best support? It is not the homeowners, it is not the park owners, it is only the predatory investor REITs and absentee owners who mostly do not live anywhere near their investment, nor do they have the same incentive that original owners had of keeping the needs of their tenants in perspective. Gets rid of their competition for the most valuable and vulnerable asset. That lot they own will always fit into someone else's budget, helping them raise the value of their investment. In most cases, it places the poorest among us. Capitalism is American, but it should have a conscience of responsibility. When it does not, government has an obligation to step in and protect its most vulnerable citizenry. When it does not provide laws for the protection, people in this unsubsidized affordable housing sector get taken advantage of. This happens every day all over America, and lawmakers are not enlightened enough to take action, and in some cases, it's just not in their personal best interest. New Hampshire, on the other hand, has been at the forefront in passing legislation that give manufactured homeowners that right and opportunity to keep their homes affordable by legislative rights giving them the opportunity to purchase the community. It still has some opportunity for improvement, but it is among the best around the country. Senate Bill 210 will have the effect of erasing a lot of that great legislation. Sponsors of this bill might suggest that it should be majority vote that determines whether they should purchase the park. Generally three mindsets when you get that registered letter in the mail. The mindsets that prevail in a decision like this are fear, curiosity, and ambivalence. Unfortunately, ambivalence is predominantly because of a real lack of understanding. Folks are struggling to meet needs within their own household, and this just does not seem that important enough to add to their plate of concerns. Who I pay rent to just doesn't feel that important to me right now. That is why I say it is proven out. Only a minority will show up to vote for what really seems to them like it is a great benefit or seems like it a great threat to them. But most, if not all, will vote to keep what they now know and understand they have a chance of losing. Action is taken by homeowners who are fearful or excited for the opportunity. Those are the folks who will come out to vote. I have a neighbor in our community who, along with several of her friends, voted against becoming a cooperative out of fear. But she and her friends were in the minority, and the community became a cooperative. She now witnesses the fallacy of her fears, serves as a volunteer in the community, and enjoys a lot rent that has not changed in 7 years. Her biggest fears never came to fruition. The fear of a burden of a huge debt that now has only 14 years left on it has gone away, just as the fear of going into debt for her first ever mortgage did after the joy and benefits of homeownership buried the fear of the mortgage. Thousands of homeowners will never witness this transformative opportunity if Senate Bill 210 passes the Senate. The surety of this is clear. You will seldom read or see the stories of homeowners losing their homes to a change of use by a developer or because the rents have been hiked to unaffordability because it is not so-called newsworthy or gets buried behind the more compelling stories. But my colleagues see and hear it regularly. These homeowners who are displaced lose their only major asset, however humble it may be. This is affordable to them, and when it goes away, where do they go? Many go to homelessness because there's no place else to go, or they move on to unsubsidized housing, go on from unsubsidized housing to subsidized affordable housing. This is not a win for taxpayers. It is not a win for the low-income family. Becoming a cooperative is a big win for the residents financially and socially, whether they knew it before or discovered it after they became one. I ask you not to negate what you did 35 years ago and being pioneers in the forefront when it gave us in New Hampshire a level playing field so that the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund could come to the rescue of over 8,500 proud homeowners of manufactured homes and affordable housing. This legislation will have the effect of doing just that. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. If you have written testimony, just so you know, you don't have to read it verbatim. You can pass it into our clerk, and he will print it off. And we read these every night, so it sticks with us more that way. Alyssa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be brief. My name is Alyssa Margolin. I serve as Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We're a statewide coalition of 80 organizations united around affordable housing policy and ending homelessness in New Hampshire. I want to start by saying that we've been working with so many of you for the last 11 years to really address policy and resource solutions to our state's housing crisis. And thank you for all of the good work that's gone into that. Housing Action New Hampshire is opposed to Senate Bill 210. Our members include those who develop, finance, manage affordable housing properties, supportive housing providers, homeless service agencies, and our public housing agencies. The New Hampshire Community Loan Fund is also a member of Housing Action New Hampshire. Our members are your partners in your policy and resource solutions, so they are the ones on the front lines trying to identify ways to develop more affordable housing solutions for our state's workforce and for those who find themselves needing a little more support to be successful in sustaining quality housing solutions. New Hampshire Community Loan Fund is our state's CDFI, and this is really important. As a CDFI, they are, their mission is to make sure that they are moving capital and things like equity for those who cannot access our regular finance institutions. And I'll also say I serve as Director of Housing Action New Hampshire in a consulting capacity, and for the last 15 years, I've been working for many organizations that are dedicated in their missions to helping the disenfranchised, working to problem solve on solutions so we can all enjoy our vibrant Granite State. And I will say the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund is a national model and a very strong partner in what my colleague calls the conspiracy for the good. As you know, and we are in the midst of a crisis around affordability and supply. And I would like to submit that we that you consider a perspective of do no harm. We have a strong program here. It sounds like there are some issues that have happened that have some residents feeling like they weren't part of a process. I ask that you allow these agencies that work so hard in finding solutions and helping those sustain affordable solutions to problem solve rather than to legislate in something that will really dismantle an important national program. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Brandon? LeMay? Matthew? They seem to be together. Will Stewart? He's in the hall. You want to go get? No. Okay. Here he is.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tim. One of our key priorities at Stay Work Play, which is, if you're not familiar with us, we are a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to attract and retain more young people. And one of our key priorities this year and past years has been housing affordability. And we believe this bill will negatively impact affordable housing options for younger people in particular, but all Granite Staters in general. I don't have more to add on the specifics of the bill. I think the previous speakers have done a pretty thorough job of talking about it, so I will leave my testimony there and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, great job.
Thank you.
Sandy?
It's still good morning. My name is Sandra Moran, and I live at Bearview Crossing, and I am for support of the SB 210. The reason why I'm going to read this today is another member from another co-op wanted to be here but couldn't, and asked me to read what he had to say about Rock, New Hampshire, community home loan. Okay, he starts off by saying, the following is a description of my interaction with Rock, New Hampshire, whatever. Over the past 6 years, I have been the president at Crossing at Sleepy Hollow Cooperative, Inc. since inception of 2016. Rock and the corporation were instrumental in helping us acquire our park when the previous owner of the park decided to sell the property. Since that time, Rock and the New Hampshire home loan involvement have been limited at best. Case in point, our property taxes have increased from $44,000 to $94,000 in the past 3 years, causing us to increase the monthly lot rent for our residents members by $60. While that amount doesn't sound like much, but like most of the people, it means the difference between being able to afford your medication and paying rent, or feeding your family, or paying your bills. The town of Newmarket decided that Crossing at Sleepy Hollow did not warrant an abatement even after receiving a 37-page application from our legal representative. Rock and the housing company did nothing to support the effort. They did provide a spokesman to testify at the Superior Court when we appealed the town's decision. When I asked them about having someone from their organization working for us on this, they answered that they will watch and see how things happen, and they'll see if they need to put in an appeal with the other co-ops. The Rock and NH, New Hampshire, charge a monthly fee for support, and I do not know what support they offer. Their representatives have only attended approximately 25% of our meetings since our inception, most of the time attending within the first year. Since then, a handful of times. Rock and the community home loan offered virtually no support when we struggled with cash flow due to a construction water sewage repair bill that was over $40,000 over budget. Finally, my thoughts. We, Crossing at Sleepy Hollow Cooperative, Inc., cannot be the only cooperative that is struggling or who is facing an extremely excessive tax increase for their town. If no one from Rock is interested, and the finance company did not see this coming or failed to react to this happening, that is a high level of irresponsibility on their part. They are the lender. Shouldn't they care for the lenders to ensure that they are solvent enough to continue to pay their bills? Shouldn't they address the issue starting from the level and not the cooperative go the fight alone? His name is Colin White. That's who I was reading for.
Great, thank you. I've just got a question. Were all three of you in the parks when they went co-op?
Yes.
You were, Louise, you were?
And John Murphy.
And John and,
Were you all in support of the?
No.
No, you were.
We were all against.
You were all against going.
John Murphy was for.
Yeah.
John was for going co-op. You were against going co-op?
But I have to explain why.
No, that's okay. I was just curious.
I was as it was presented.
Okay.
That's what made my decision. It wasn't because I'm not for community, Rock. I'm for them, but the way it was presented, I couldn't support that.
Oh, no.
And you were the same? You voted against?
Oh, yeah.
Forming a co-op? Okay.
And that's it.
You haven't been there that long? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Questions? None? Thank you.
It's the same old stuff, huh?
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Norman Turcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I will do my best speed reading act here because you have exhibited the patience of Job. I would like, before I touch on my prepared remarks, to just say, as I sat and listened to all of those who appeared before you this morning, it became clear to me that it was sort of, there was a discussion in the minds of some folks as to who was going to pay for the park if the park changes hands. Is it going to be the residents who are going to form a ROC, or is it going to be an outside investor, be it an equity fund group or Joe down the street? And, you know, as obvious as it seems, and I certainly mean you no disrespect that you wouldn't realize this, but the fact is that the residents are going to pay for the park. If I buy the park, I'm going to build my payments on my loan into the monthly rent that I have to charge. I mean, I'm not buying the park because I'm filled with the milk of human kindness. You know, I'm in this as a business, and that doesn't make me a bad person or a good person. It's just a fact of life. So the question really is, you know, the residents are going to pay for the park. It's just really a question as to whether they're going to own it. But I'd like to just speed read. The reason I'm here is because I spent virtually my entire life with one of the probably more visible cooperatives in the state of New Hampshire, Associated Grocers. Started working at Associated Grocers when I was 13 years old. I used to get paid in a little brown envelope in cash, so I suspect I was probably working illegally, but that's a long time ago. Prior, and I'd like to tell you how Associated Grocers came about, and so I'm going to try to condense 75 years into 75 seconds. Prior to World War II, every neighborhood had a neighborhood grocery store. There were certainly no Market Baskets and Shaw's and Hannafords, and certainly no Super Walmarts. And that's how the business was run. The local grocer, if he was a good business person, made a good living, everything's fine. In the mid-30s, A&P and First National appear on the scene, and they begin to build stores all around the country. These stores are 2 or 3 times the size of your neighborhood store, and most importantly, they own their own distribution center. They're not buying from a middleman. They own distribution centers. They're buying truckloads or rail car loads of product from General Foods and General Mills and Kraft and Heinz and Procter & Gamble. So they're buying at great prices. Whereas if I'm a neighborhood grocer, I've got to pay a middleman because I'm buying a case of this and a case of that. My cost of goods is spectacularly higher, which obviously makes it very difficult for me to survive. A group of independent retailers met frequently in southern New Hampshire, often in the Manchester area, and discussed their business and what they were doing and how they were becoming more successful and so on. But one of those grocers kept raising his hand and saying, guys, you know, the tsunami is coming. There's going to be a First National here. There's going to be an A&P. It's only a matter of time. We have to form a cooperative so that we can buy directly from manufacturers. And, you know, yeah, but, you know, where are we going to get the money? And we don't know anything about warehousing and trucking and so on. And we don't know anything about dealing with national manufacturers. And I'm running my little store in my neighborhood. I'm doing okay. Fast forward, the gentleman who kept raising his hand and wanting to start the cooperative, his store failed. And he moved his family down to the Boston area, got a job with Raytheon, was doing pretty well, stayed in touch with some friends in the Manchester area, and heard that they finally started the cooperative. Hallelujah. This is terrific. Except it wasn't initially quite so terrific. at the end of a year or two, they had lost everything they invested in the co-op. And they met to try to figure out whether to file bankruptcy or did they have any choice. And somebody said, you know, if we could get that little guy who used to get up at our meetings all the time and tell us we needed to form a co-op, he's got real fire in his belly, and he's a pretty sharp guy. You know, if we could get him to come back and run this, I think he could turn it around and save it. They reached him, they met with him. He was kind enough not to laugh because they offered him half of what he was making at Raytheon. But he was so passionate about what the cooperative could do for independent retailers and how it could help. You can't guarantee success any more than any of these rocks can. Every single one of them will do everything right. But he really believed that this was the answer. So he found a way to make a deal with them and said, I'll take a 50% cut in pay because that's all you can pay me. But I want an incentive program so that if I make this as successful as I think I can, then you'll end up paying me well. And he moved his family back to New Hampshire, and in a building, some lease space not very far from here, initially in Concord, they started operating the company. Today, you see Associated Grocers trucks running up and down the highway all the time. Associated Grocers has a magnificent state-of-the-art distribution center in Pembroke. They pay $1 million a year in real estate taxes to Pembroke. They employ 1,000 people. It's, I think, by any measure, a wonderful success. I had the privilege of serving as CEO for about 30 years. And the reason I know the history is because that little guy that kept getting up and saying, we've got to form a co-op, was my father. Excuse me, I didn't expect that. So this is, you know, very near and dear to me. I can tell you I have seen co-ops be spectacularly successful. I have seen co-ops not be successful at all. But I do know that when they formed Associated Grocers, and at the time it was a different name, I think it was Certified Wholesalers, or if we searched the Secretary of State's office, we'd probably find the original name. If they had said, you know, if there was a statute that said they needed to get all the neighborhood grocers together and get 51% of them to vote in favor of this, Associated Grocers would have been dead on arrival. I mean, it just wouldn't have happened. People, the way we are made as human beings, we're not all ready to jump out there in front and carry the banner. Usually you have a handful of people that lead the process, and the rest are happy to follow. I can tell you to this day, if you go to the annual stockholders meeting of Associated Grocers, we struggle. And I say we, by the way, I've been retired for 15 years, so I'm not here, I should have added that, I'm not here as an official representative of Associated Grocers. But today we struggle. If we get 20% of the members of the co-op to come to the annual meeting, we think we've done well. A friend of mine years ago said to me, if they were unhappy, they'd come to the meeting. So, you know, Associated Grocers isn't perfect, by the way, but apparently we've done a lot of things really, really well. So I called somebody that used to work for me because I was stunned that he had been president of his rock in the southwestern part of the state. And I spent an hour on the phone with him saying, Dave, tell me, how did this start and what did you do and, you know, what were the obstacles and who helped? And frankly, he was profuse in his praise for the Community Loan Fund. And the one thing he said, and I circled it this morning, The park rent is lower today than it was 13 years ago before the Rock was created. So these people live there, they take care of it, and they take pride in it. And I beg you, I mean, I get very frustrated in the spring because I see the weeds in my lawn. And that drives me crazy. My friends come to visit and say, God, your lawn looks great. And I say, really? Because I see the weeds. I mean, I see the problems. And I think that's what we're wrestling with here this morning with the problems. I think we need to be careful that we don't destroy the whole thing and vote. I understand that if I had never been involved with a co-op, I would jump in and I would vote for Senate Bill 210 because I would think that's perfectly reasonable, except that I have experienced co-ops and a very successful one, but most of the members of the co-op don't jump in and really commit and get involved. So I think it would be easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm asking you, obviously, to vote Senate Bill 210 inexpedient to legislate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting you say when they're upset, they'll show up, and when they're not, they won't. I find that with the legislation I prime, when no one's there to testify, it goes right through. When it's something everyone's upset about, we can't get through the bill. We have 400 people show up, so I certainly recognize that. So thank you for your testimony
Thank you.
today. Any questions?
Yeah.
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have on the list. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on SB 210 that has something to add that we haven't already heard? Seeing none, I will, almost had the gavel down. You know, I'm an auctioneer. We usually wait.
I'll make it fast. Listening this, my name is Clara Monier, and years ago I was the head of New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. And I have here a letter that I wrote 16 years ago asking a bill very similar to this be declared inexpedient to legislate. And I would suggest that that's what happens to this bill. I first want to thank Jeb Bradley for the work he's done for affordable housing and his commitment to it. Okay, and it isn't just lately. He has been a champion for affordable housing. But when I listen to the problems from the Allenstown Rock, this bill really doesn't address those problems. Those are problems that could be handled without this piece of legislation. So I would say this bill doesn't really solve the problems at Allenstown. So whatever you do, don't destroy what we have in the resident-owned communities here in New Hampshire. It is successful. It's a tool to do affordable housing, and we need it now more than ever. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I'll close this hearing on Senate Bill 210. We're gonna... Is Senator Bradley here? You ready to, 385, is that yours? No, 385. You want a couple minutes? No. 210. We'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 385. Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Jeb Bradley from Wolfboro. Hopefully a little less contentious a bill. I'm here at the request of the banking industry who want to have measures in place to combat financial exploitation, especially of senior citizens. and other vulnerable people. I think we've all seen and read some of the stories of people that have been exploited. What this bill seeks to do is allow a financial institution to place a hold on the disbursement of funds if they think that there is exploitative activity occurring. The banking department, as part of their review, would have the ability to request the financial institution extend the delay in the original bill by 10 days. I also have an amendment that Aaron has and should be passing it out, that the banking industry negotiated with the banking department, and you know what, given the length of time I took on 210, I'm stopping right here.
Nice, nice. And I won't allow any questions. Thank you. John Williams. And Rachel.
Chairman French and members of the Senate Commerce Committee, for the record, I am John Williams, the Legislative Director for the Department of Health and Human Services, and with me today is...
Good morning. I'm Rachel Lakin, and I am the Administrator for the Adult Protection Program administered by the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services.
And Senator French, falling in line with Senator Bradley, we are here in full support of this legislation. The New Hampshire Bankers Association did a tremendously good job in putting together this bill, and I anticipate that you'll be hearing from them very shortly, so they can certainly provide you with feedback on more of the details. With Ms. Lakin with us, our agency sees this as helping with our efforts in terms of exploitation of vulnerable adults, and we really appreciate the committee's time and attention to the bill. With that said, there was an amendment that was proffered to you by Senator Bradley, and we also, in addition to the banking department that work with the Bankers Association, the Department of Health and Human Services also were actively engaged by the association. We appreciate their efforts early on in reaching out to us. We just have one suggested amendment on the amendment, which is amendment number 0520S. 520S. On page 2 on line 1, the amendment contemplates a plan to be done by the department in collaboration with the Department of Justice, or in consultation with it. We would suggest an amendment to the date on line 1 from August 1st of 2023. As you know, the plan is intended to allow us to take additional steps to further these efforts as part of the 24-25 budget. To accomplish that, we would need to have the report obviously done prior to the budget process. So we're respectfully requesting the change of the date from August 1st of 2023 to October 1st of 2022. I think when you hear from members of the New Hampshire Bankers Association, they'll be able to respond to you on their thoughts on our request, which I think is favorable if I feel the energy, positive energy from behind me. And with that, we have no other comments unless you have questions for the department.
Great, thank you. Questions? Nope, thanks. Our very own Christy Merrill is back among us.
Mr. Chair, is it okay if we have Joan Guile?
Oh yeah, as many as you want. And Ryan, you gonna join them too? Nice. Just state your names for the record.
Sure. Okay. Let's see, coming that way, all right. Good afternoon, Honorable Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. For the record, my name is Christy Merrill, representing the New Hampshire Bankers Association.
I'm Joan Guile. I'm President and CEO of Piscataqua Savings Bank in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
And Ryan Hale, Vice President, Government Relations for New Hampshire Bankers Association.
We're here today representing 38 member banks, and the industry employs about 6,000 employees, and we are here today in strong support, and we've worked with Senator Bradley on this legislation, and we just want to say thank you to Senator Bradley for bringing this legislation forward. Senate Bill 385 was crafted after a 2019 securities bill. The language is very similar. Senator Soucy was actually the sponsor at the time was suspected. Senate Bill 252 passed the body on a voice vote and the House and was signed into law by Governor Sununu. As introduced, the really important thing that you all need to know is that this legislation would allow a bank to delay a disbursement of funds from an account of an eligible adult or an account they are a beneficiary of if they suspect financial exploitation. And that's really the key tool that they don't have today. And the bank would have to provide written notice to the banking department of the delay not more than 2 days after the delay occurs. I just want to point out that under RSA 161F, banks already have to report to the Department of Health and Human Services when they suspect financial exploitation. And so what this does is it requires an additional written notice if there is a delay in the disbursement of funds. I do wanted to speak to the amendment number 0520S. It addresses some of the concerns. We've had a lot of conversations with the Attorney General's office, the banking department, as well as Health and Human Services about the mechanics of all of this. And so the amendment that you see is really a result of those discussions. So I just want to point out a couple of the changes in the amendment. Instead of sending the written notice to the banking department as introduced, this would mean that the amendment has the bank send the notice to the Department of Health and Human Services with a copy going to the banking department when they put a hold of the disbursement. And you can see that on lines 14 through 16 of the amendment. The other change I want to point out is it eliminates the language that would allow the banking department to request the delay be extended for another 10 days. And then you've also heard a little bit about the report. So that's new language to this that requires Health and Human Services to write a report working with the banking department and the Attorney General. And we understand the desire to change the report date to October 1st, 2022. We're totally fine with that. No concerns. We were also approached by the State Commission on Aging, and I understand they are supportive of this. Because of the issues, and they actually would like to see a copy of the report as well. They'd like to receive that. We're fine with that as well. That's the committee's decision. And what the report will consist of the number of reports they've received, as well as the recommendations on how to further combat future exploitation from occurring, which we think is important. This is a crisis impacting hundreds of thousands of people in this country. The Federal Trade Commission reported in 2020 there were over 330,000 cases of abuse, resulting in over $600 million in losses. In many instances, as you all probably know, this abuse results in some of our most vulnerable citizens losing their life savings. And sadly, a lot of these are happening by family members or people that are close to them. Banks play a significant role in stopping this type of abuse from continuing to occur because they are typically among the first to see it. Unfortunately, there's not much they are able to do today. Senate Bill 385 will give banks an additional tool by allowing them to put a hold on the disbursement of funds when exploitation is suspected, which keeps the victim of the abuse from losing their life savings while allowing the authorities the time to act. And with me today, Joan Giles introduced herself, and she's going to provide a little bit more color and context. So in closing, we would ask for your support, and we thank you for the opportunity to come before you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may recall a case, a very highly publicized case a couple of years ago with a Portsmouth senior citizen and a police officer. I was intimately involved in that case and was called to testify. This topic is really near and dear to my heart, and I'm very passionate about it, and I can speak about it all afternoon, but I won't. We know our customers very well, sometimes better than family members. We can see any decline in memory, any changes in behaviors, both in physical behaviors and in transactional behaviors. And when something out of the ordinary happens, our frontline staff really care about our customers, and we want to take care of them. I have a couple stories that I'll just share with you. Teddy, an older developmentally delayed customer, comes into the bank once a week, does the same transaction. He's always walking because he lives in the elderly subsidized housing in town, sometimes on his bicycle. Well, suddenly, one day he comes in and takes a large withdrawal, and he is not his normal jovial self, not calling the teller by her nickname, Sarah Bear. He won't look him in the eyes, and he gets very agitated when spoken to. This happened 3 or 4 times. Finally, the frontline staff noticed that he was getting in a car with another woman. This was very unusual for him. It wasn't a lot of dollars. That wasn't the point. I mean, he has next to nothing, but more of his mental state, his anguish was a problem. And fortunately, in Portsmouth, we have a police officer, Rochelle Jones, who is very supportive and an advocate for these people. We reached out to her, and she was able to stop it. Not before the customer lost $6,000 or $7,000, which, in the grand scheme of things, is not a whole lot of money, but to him, it was everything. Fortunately, because of her action, she was able to stop it and actually get most of his money back. Another woman who, was at risk for a larger amount of money was doing wire transfer. She was wiring money from the bank to another bank. Wouldn't tell us why. Finally, we discovered, we got it out of her, that she was had a friend who she found on the internet who wanted her to pay the taxes on a shipment of gold coming from Sweden that was stuck in the Dominican Republic. We had a very difficult time convincing this woman that she was being victimized of the scam. Added to the complication, she was in Florida for the winter, so we couldn't drive to her house. So we had to contact state agencies in Florida. We contacted the FBI. It took a lot of time to try to get to the bottom of it. Finally, we called the police department in the town in Florida, and they did a wellness check, and they said she's fine. She can do what she wants with her money. She came back, and eventually we convinced her, but there was $100,000 that was taken out of her account, plus Bitcoin transactions on top of that. We knew she wasn't doing those transactions. But because of where she was in the circumstances, if we could have blocked those transactions and taken our time to get to the bottom of it, it would have been very helpful. So really, I could tell you more and more stories, and this bill gives us another tool that we need. It helps protect our customers, and it's not just about the total dollar values, but it's the impact on their lives.
Thank you. So could you just run me through the process? This would give the banks 2 days to hold the checks.
It would give us more time than that, 2 weeks.
2 weeks, so.
2 days, they would have to notify Health and Human Services of the delay.
So then the state becomes involved with someone's money.
Yeah.
So then what does, so they have 2 days to inform the state.
Correct.
The state's informed. What then happens? The state investigates?
Sometimes, it depends. The Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services sometimes can step in. Again, their resources are rather limited, but I had a case where they stepped in and were able to stop the family member from talk to the individual to find out what's going on. And in one case, the family members weren't just taking their money, but they were withholding food and medication from the gentleman. And with a little prodding from me, they were able to call the gentleman's son in California, because I couldn't call, you have to remember, I'm under privacy laws. I can't talk to family members. So that's what's important, for them to be able to step in and do some of the things that I'm legally not able to do. And again, that takes time. It takes time for them to get the report. It takes time for them to investigate and come to a conclusion.
I just want to add to that, Senator. Senate RSA 161F, that's the current process that exists that involves Health and Human Services. And so that's the process that would be carried out.
Follow you.
So we can try to answer those questions, but I think Rachel and John Williams, if they're still here, they can certainly do a better job of that than we can.
I can do some reading also. Yeah, thanks.
And I think someone from the Attorney General's office is here too to
Great.
explain their role in the process.
Okay, questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Cheryl Steinberg?
Hello, Chairman French and members of the committee. My name is Cheryl Steinberg, and I'm here in support of Senate Bill 385. I am the director of the Justice and Aging Project at New Hampshire Legal Assistance, and I'm also here on behalf of the New Hampshire Alliance for Healthy Aging, which is a coalition of over 300 stakeholders that are devoted to the health and well-being of New Hampshire's older citizens. And together we do support this bill. You've already heard about, I mean, this bill, I think, really would be most relevant in helping to prevent scams that are so prevalent these days, and I think you've heard a lot about them. There's literally like almost a new scam a day. and older people are the ones that are most vulnerable to these, because particularly in light of the pandemic, with the social isolation that has taken place, these scammers are very well trained in how to befriend these people and get them to give them their money. So the problem with us is, we've been, financial exploitation is one of our priority areas at New Hampshire Legal Assistance and the Justice and Aging Project, but we really can't do anything when someone comes to us and says, I just gave $20,000 to this person that, some scammer that's in Africa or wherever, and once the money is gone, even if we could sue them and get a judgment, it's usually just a useless piece of paper because, as you know, the saying goes, you can't squeeze blood from a stone. And so really being able to stop the money from getting into the hands of the scammers is by far the most effective thing that could happen. So because this bill does do that and is just limited to the disbursements and it isn't freezing their bank accounts, I think it's a really good way to try to, resolve, well, not resolve it, but to address some of these instances of exploitation. It's one good new tool that will be in the toolbox. I mean, it certainly isn't going to solve the whole problem. It's still a huge, unfortunately, a big problem, but this will be very important and a step to take that I think you really should consider passing, and I'm in full support of it. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I also wanted to point out Rebecca Skye, who is the Executive Director of the State Commission on Aging, is here. In case you wanted to ask her any questions, I think it was already mentioned she'd like a copy of the report sent to the commission.
Great, thank you. Questions?
Okay.
Seeing none, thank you very much. Brandon Garrod.
Morning, Mr. Chairperson, members of the committee. Brandon Garrod, I am a Senior Assistant Attorney General at the New Hampshire Department of Justice, currently the Bureau Chief of the Consumer Protection and Antitrust Bureau, but my role when I came to the Attorney General's office in 2016 was to form a unit that was dedicated to the investigation and prosecution of crimes committed against the elderly, which usually manifested itself into financial exploitation. Given my experience in that capacity and the mission of the Attorney General's office in combating elder financial exploitation, I'm here today on behalf of the Attorney General's office to support this bill. I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience when I was the elder abuse prosecutor that particularly gives me some insight, and I think I can answer some of the questions about mechanically how this would work and the difference that this would make immediately if it was signed into law. When we started the Elder Abuse and Exploitation Unit, we were heavily dependent on the Bureau of Elder and Adult Services, who send law enforcement referrals on a daily basis to the Department of Justice that allege financial exploitation as well as abuse and neglect. And the Attorney General's office, at the time it was me, now it's another prosecutor, would review those every day. And if it appeared that there was something criminal or something that the Attorney General's office could be of assistance in, could help investigate in, or could provide victim advocacy services in, we would take on that case. And whether that manifested itself in a criminal investigation of a conduct or simply reaching out to the victim in the case to provide victim advocacy to make sure that that person understood that what had happened to them was a scam and try to prevent them from sending money down the road. That was a really, and continues to be a really strong function of the Elder Abuse and Exploitation Unit. The most frustrating part of being in that capacity was time and time again receiving a referral from the Bureau of Elder and Adult Services indicating that an elderly person had sent hundreds of thousands of dollars, taken it, withdrawn it out of their account at a bank, and sent it overseas. And by the time we reach out to the person, you come to find, you expect that the people that are going to fall victim to these are, your typical, upper senior citizens who don't really have capacity to make informed decisions or to understand what's happening. But we found out that was not the case at all. The majority of the victims in the cases were really well-educated, rational, totally with it, and just got caught up in these scams and in a flash made a decision to go to the bank and withdraw everything that they'd worked so hard for. And by the time we were able to get involved and speak with some of these victims, as Cheryl Steinberg said, once the money is gone, there was nothing that we were able to do other than to counsel the person and ensure that they didn't send any further money, but in many cases, there was no more money to send. And it's with these cases, and I'll particularly highlight the romance scam cases where scammers actually spend weeks, sometimes months, developing an online relationship with an elderly person so that there is a feeling of trust that's established and a feeling of love that's actually established with the elderly person. These are the most vicious scams that we see because that feeling of love and that feeling of attachment that the elderly person has to the scammer causes them, in many cases, to completely set aside all sense of logic and reason before they make decisions that will impact their financial future for the rest of their lives. And so mechanically, I think to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, I think that where the difference could be made in a case like this is if, in that exact scenario that I just talked about, where an elderly person has been caught up in, say, a romance scam, and the person had finally taken the step of asking them to go to the bank and withdraw, say, $100,000 to send it overseas for whatever, nonsensical accident that they have, a terrible misfortune that has befallen them this time. If this were in place and the bank had the ability to recognize that this appeared to be financial exploitation and to push a pause on it, and for a referral to then be, a notification to be made to DHHS, which would then result in a referral to our office, potential financial exploitation, we would have the ability to intervene with the victim to try to educate them, to get them to understand that what they're involved in isn't real, and that it's the same exact scenario that we see with victims time and time again. And hopefully, through that process, be able to educate them enough so that they can make a better decision about their money and actually have the benefit of that money moving forward. We, in a lot of cases, have had success having those types of conversations. It takes a lot of work. It's not an instant realization, but we have a really strong victim advocate who's dedicated to this type of work. And when people get hooked into these scams, through constant conversations, in person, over the phone, really building a sense of trust between the advocate and the victim and showing them, the hundreds of cases where the scammers saying the exact same thing to other people that they are saying to this victim and showing them, the holes in the logic of the story that's being told to them. We really have been able to make a difference and sort of unhook people from being victims of these scams. It's not to say that it would work with everyone, but I do think that having this ability for a pause and an intervention to try to educate and allow somebody who has the ability to make a reasonable decision to make a better decision about their own money ultimately would be a huge benefit for the state of New Hampshire, particularly for some of its most vulnerable citizens. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So I heard testimony that a lot of this is relative on relative. I can understand the overseas shipment of money, that's easy to understand, but what would trigger criminal action of a child and their parent?
So there are unquestionably two large categories of financial exploitation that are both equally as problematic. I think this is most targeted at, and the most frequently you have people that are going in withdrawing large sums of money, and through some basic question asking, you can identify, oh, I'm going to send this overseas to my boyfriend or my fiance or whatever it is. That category, I think this is particularly effective at addressing. There's a separate issue of family members that exploit elderly relatives who are here in the state, and that sometimes takes the form of the elderly person going in, but usually it's the younger person or the other family member going in using like for example, a power of attorney or some other document in order to withdraw money on the person's behalf. In some cases, I have seen cases where a person will go into the bank with their elderly relative next to them, basically do all the talking for them. That can sometimes draw a red flag, in which I think this would also be very effective in combating that type of a circumstance. But the family member cases, those are the cases that we actually criminally investigate and prosecute. You know, if we have a person in this state who is committing financial exploitation, ever since 2016, we have a very strong financial exploitation criminal statute on the books, and we have used it with great success, and will continue to do so. I see this potential bill as helping in that scenario sometimes, but really being more targeted as addressing the widespread overseas phone, email, internet, social media scams that we see, which typically result in irreparable harm. You know, sometimes we are able to prosecute and are able to get the money back through restitution if the person is here, identifiable, and prosecutable. But with these scams, that's unfortunately not the case.
Yep. Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
That's all I have to testify. Anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 385? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. One more bill. Let me see, Senate Bill 214 with Senator Sherman at the helm.
Ready?
Go right ahead, Senator.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
For the record, my name is Senator Tom Sherman, District 24, 11 delightful towns along the seacoast. And I bring SB 214, which is relative to conflicts of interest and contract powers of condominium unit owners associations. This bill actually essentially was introduced in the House in 2019, or I guess it was 2020, and it did not make it due to COVID. It cleared the House with broad support, but it never made it over to the Senate as a result of the COVID pandemic. So this was brought forward at the request of two constituents, both of whom have been running into problems in their condominium complex where in those cases, actually, a majority owner of the condominium also owns the homeowners, the service that does all the maintenance on the property. And because of that particular relationship, they have virtually no say over who gets the contract, what gets done. There's no accountability. They can't dismiss the person if they don't like what's being done because they will never achieve majority ownership, so they can never oversee it. And so that raises the question of, if they're the best business, then you can still hire them, the condo association. But if there is an association, if the person who owns the condo, any component of the condo association has a conflict of interest, all this bill is saying is that it has to be disclosed, there has to be transparency, and they can't participate in the vote. Of course, if they're a great firm, very competitive, do a great job, they're still going to get the job. But it just makes sure that that sort of nepotism component of it does not exist. And so I think it's a common sense bill. It protects the condo association. And again, it doesn't impede free market, of course, because you can still go with that business if, number one, they're the least expensive, and two, they provide the best service. It just takes out that conflict of interest from the actual decision making. Happy to take any questions.
Questions? No, you explained it fully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Reed. Ellen Reed. Lou.
Good afternoon, Senators.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you today. My name is Lou Gargiulo, and I reside in Hampton Falls, New Hampshire. I'm the CEO and founder of Great North Property Management, located in Exeter, New Hampshire. My firm is a family-owned business. I employ approximately 150 people, four of which are family members. They are responsible for the management of more than 25,000 homeowner association units that house over 75,000 people. I'm here today to voice my strong objection to Senate Bill 214. It is my professional opinion that the bill is a calculated solution in search of a phantom problem, a problem that does not exist. When you consider that there are over 266,000 residents in condominium associations, I can't not say what Senator Sherman said. He received 2 people were complaining out of 266,000. That's quite a percentage. It is my I'm going to read to you the exact verbiage of the bill. Bear with me. In part, it reads, if any unit owner or unit owner's relative or business where a unit owner of the unit owner's relative is an owner, a director of a business, or has a pecuniary interest in a business, bids or contracts for provisions of goods or services to be provided with that unit owners association, the unit owner shall recuse himself or herself in any participation in the vote. This bill is designed to impose voter disqualification of a person or group of people, much like myself. To forfeit their votes, SB 214 puts New Hampshire Association member votes under attack. It will lead to significant burdens to eligible unit owners trying to exercise their most fundamental constitutional right, and will also allow, and most importantly, the minority to speak for the majority. This bill seems targeted and most likely unconstitutional. Also of great concern is that this bill does not consider that a real estate investment group or a single entity may own a majority interest in an association. This bill nullifies an entity or an investor of their voice and vote in the management of and day-to-day operations of a self-governed association. Again, I'm going to read to you more verbiage from the bill. The Unit Owners Association shall disclose to its unit owners the relationship of any unit owner or business where a unit owner is the owner or director of a business or has a pecuniary interest in a business with a contract for provisions of goods or services, and mail it, and it must be mailed to all unit owners, as well as posting it at all exits and entrances controlled by the association. This is often referred to as doxing, which is illegal. This bill forces associations to publish private or identifying information that may prove harmful to the targeted owner's property or personal well-being. I ask you, Senators, to what end? The language of this bill and its content substitutes the wisdom of the elected association board who have a fiduciary, and I repeat, fiduciary duty, and vested interest in the property to make sound decisions. For the record, any potential conflict of interest is already fully disclosed in the association minutes and are readily available pursuant to RSA 356:B:37 to the unit owners. With that said, this bill will accomplish 2 things. It will significantly impact self-government and community associations, and 2, it will cost the taxpayers of our great state an indeterminable amount of money to provide a solution to a phantom problem. In closing, this bill will have a significant impact on my company, the company that Senator Sherman mentioned, and to my family, and to my employees, and to me. From my vantage point, it appears to be targeted legislation, specifically targeted to me. And with that, I ask you to find it inexpedient to legislate.
Thank you.
You have any questions?
Questions?
Thank you.
Lou, could you go over again how all conflicts are already disclosed in existing law?
Well, first, if you're a board member, you have a fiduciary interest to disclose all conflicts. Secondly, the minutes of the condominium association are where the information would be available. And under 356B, I think :38, you would be required to have those minutes available to any unit owner. I think that the individual that was referenced in this particular introduction is a tenant. And yes, the tenants do not get that information, nor are they entitled to that information. This is for the unit owners, and the unit owners know exactly who is involved with whatever facet of the association.
And if I could.
You may.
I think you also said, I was trying to take notes, there are 265,000 residents in New Hampshire.
Correct.
That live in condominiums.
Correct.
And I think we heard from the sponsor of the bill that there were only 2 complaints about this
Correct.
exact situation.
Correct.
So
Go ahead.
I know you're in a hurry, but.
No.
So if you're a majority owner of a condominium development, say a developer, that 100 units, and you still have retained 75 units sold, 25, and you're renting the other 75, and that condominium association, you have your own property management company that you contract with, so an LLC presumably. If this were to pass, the 25 unit owners would be able to override the majority.
That is
unit
correct.
owner. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
And factually speaking, in the particular association that was mentioned in the bill in 2020, that was, in that particular association, I own upwards of 80% of the units, and apparently two tenants, one of them who is a state rep, decided to bring forward this bill back in 2020.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Reed.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair and honorable members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ellen Reed. I represent Rockingham 17, Newmarket, and Newfields. I am going to give you the full story of this. Actually, the first time this bill was in was before 2020. I believe it was 2019. So I live in a condo association. I rent, and I'll get to more about this in a minute, from someone who is not the previous speaker. I've always rented from that person from the time I moved to New Hampshire. And I would hear, not knowing really anything about condo associations, I've never been a condo owner, I would hear my neighbors talk about their landlord and how he was, and if you forgive the phrase, the word slumlord was used a lot. And I'd also notice that at the same time, all this extra work was being done outside that didn't seem to make sense. For example, trees would be taken down and replaced, and those trees would be taken down again and replaced. It just didn't add up that someone wouldn't spend money on their units but would do all this extra work. And then it wasn't until probably 2018 that I was made aware that the person who owned all these units actually also owned the property management company that and so he was voting to give his own business, all of the business of the condo association. So then it made sense. Oh, of course, all this extraneous work is being done because the person benefits. I'm like, isn't that a conflict of interest? That has to be illegal. It has to be illegal to have, you have two interests there. As an owner, you want to keep the actual homeowners association fee as low as possible and get the necessary tasks done for as cheaply as possible. But as a business owner, you want to make as much money as possible off of that. And I thought, this has to be illegal. I looked into it. Indeed, it is illegal in many, many, many other states, especially in states that have a high per capita condo association existence, like Florida, which has the most condo associations per capita. It's extremely illegal. In fact, Florida legislation is the one I would like to actually see passed in this state. It's extremely comprehensive. Also, I would just like to point out the fact that, indeed, none of these states have had any problems with the laws, the conflict of interest laws that they've passed, means that it is constitutional. Put in a bill saying that if you own units, that you shouldn't be able to also be the beneficiary of those contracts. And that bill was passed out of the House with an amendment, and it was one of the casualties of the COVID mass tabling event. And then I put it in again the following year, and that's the 2020, 2021 last year. And the previous speaker showed up and testified against that bill. And I would like to point out, I put the original bill in long before I realized that the particular landlord that I was trying to deal with had any political aspirations whatsoever. I didn't find out until long after that this was someone who was politically active. I just thought it was a random person that was doing something that was making him money because it wasn't illegal in this state. But he showed up to testify, and I want to take a brief moment here of personal privilege, if I may, because during that House hearing, after I had testified, that the previous speaker said that me being the prime sponsor, I was a disgruntled tenant, and I was never able to address that. I have never rented from that individual ever. I've had zero business dealings. I've never even stayed overnight in a unit that he owned. So for him to claim that this is somehow personally motivated is not true. It just is an obvious conflict of interest for you to take along all the people who are just unit owners and are just trying to keep their HOA fees low and take them along through the force that you have owning most of the units and being a board member and vote to have your own company benefit when there are cheaper options available, or vote to have more work done through that company when that work doesn't need to be done. So that is the history of this particular bill. Like I said, this is the prime sponsor basically put in almost the same bill, I think, as I had put in. I would prefer actually to see the Florida legislation put in. It's much more thorough and comprehensive, but this is a simple kind of bare bones version of that conflict of interest law, which again, conflict of interest laws are not unconstitutional. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Gannon.
Thanks. So if all the residents have noticed, and let's say the service he provides was the cheapest, you got 3 prices and he's the best, are you okay with that?
Of course, and it says they recuse themselves. It doesn't say that they can't do business. My original bill, before I even knew who this was that they can't go through that person. And it was amended out of the House. That was the year that it got tabled here. It was amended out of the House to say that you can do business, but they'd have to recuse themselves.
Senator Bradley.
Why would a majority owner who has a property management company want to do excessive amounts of work or make excessive charges to drive up the condo fees? It undermines the value of the condominiums as the condo fees go up.
You're right, but that's not why someone would do that. As a business owner, you are making the profits off of those contracts, off of that work. So it's not they want to drive up the cost of the HOA fees. Is that they want those contracts. And therefore, and look, landlords do not directly pay those HOA fees. Their tenants do. So they're getting those increased HOA fees for free. They're not having to directly pay for them unless their units are going empty, which really nothing really is going empty right now.
If you drive up condo fees, you're undermining the equity value in the condominiums.
Right, you're making it more expensive without increasing the actual value of the property.
So the benefit to the owner is nominal. When you reduce the equity of a number of units, that's a bigger loss than whatever profit might be made in the management company, isn't it?
No. If you are only a unit owner, then you have one interest, and that is let's keep the HOA fee as low as possible, as long as we're still doing everything we need to do, because I would like to make my rent as low as possible. If you are also a business owner, you are now directly profiting off of that. So that money can easily exceed the nominal increase in HOA fees.
Having been associated with condos in the past myself, I totally disagree with that, but that's another day.
Any other questions?
Just a quick question, just because it doesn't pass the smell test to me. Sherman and Lou, it just seems very odd that Senator Sherman's bringing this bill forward. Did you ask him to bring this forward, or
I made him aware of the situation.
did you see that there seems to be like a conflict there and maybe another senator would have been more appropriate?
I had personal connections with the senators that I had personal connections with. I don't, if he didn't want to bring it forward, he didn't have to. I didn't ask him actually to bring it forward. I made him aware of the situation, and he also sees that it's a conflict of interest. Now, would it have been better for him to ask somebody else to put it forward? Maybe, but I'm not in the Senate, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gary?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gary Daddario, here in my capacity as the chair of the Legislative Action Committee for the state of New Hampshire for the Community Associations Institute. As an organization, we oppose this bill. The reason we oppose it, generally speaking, is that it would, we believe, have a chilling effect on associations doing business with any of the businesses that involve a unit owner. And as you've heard, based on the wording of the bill itself, it would be broad. It's not just that a unit owner owns a business that does business with the association. It's a unit owner or their family members own a business that does business with the association, or a unit owner has even a pecuniary interest in a business that does business with the association. So it's pretty broad. And at the end of the day, we believe it would have a chilling effect, and we think that's the opposite of what we'd like to see. Because in our experience, and in my own professional life, I practice law and I represent associations. It's the only thing that I do. So I see what goes on with them. And generally speaking, if you have a unit owner who has an interest in a company and that company is doing business with the association, they have every motivation to do a good job and to provide a good deal. They have their money invested in units in that association. That's motivation to do a good job. They pay the association fees as well. As a unit owner, they pay the same fee that everybody else is getting assessed. So again, the motivation is there for them to do well. If you look at the possible negative impacts, if a property is either ignored or overworked, whatever the case may be, if there's a negative impact as a result of the services provided and somehow property values are taking a hit at that association, well, the unit owner in question, the unit owner we're talking about, they take that hit as well. And then lastly, unit owners don't like to lose face with other unit owners. These are their peers within the organization. And so what we typically see is when the association chooses to do business with a known entity, that entity tends to sort of over-service and over-deal in a good way with the account because this is their own neighborhood, so to speak. Even if they don't live there, it's technically their neighborhood in a lot of respects. Now, this isn't really what we were getting into as an organization, but based on the testimony that I've heard in the past few minutes, I would just urge this committee to bear in mind that if an owner, a single person, or an entity, whatever the case may be, owns the majority of units at an association, then they are paying the majority of the expenses of that association. If someone owns 75%, then the association's budget is coming 75% out of the pocket of that individual or that entity that owns the units. So it really doesn't make any sense for such an individual to give the association a bad deal or to do something that has a negative impact on the association. Because if you're a majority owner, then when the fees are assessed and collected, you're the one paying a majority of those fees. With respect to the particulars on the bill itself, like I said at the beginning, it speaks to unit owners recusing themselves from the process. And again, I would just urge this committee to consider that the way associations are run is that the contracts are awarded by the governing board of the association, not the body of unit owners. So if an owner has to recuse themselves from the process, they're really just losing their voice. They're not even losing a vote unless they also happen to be on the board. And then if they're on the board, this legislation is unnecessary because, as you've heard and is the case, someone on the board who actually has a vote in the award of that contract is already bound by conflict of interest laws that exist to make that disclosure. With respect to other language in the bill, I think as a particular, this notion of posting signs at all entrances and exits, it's really sort of scarlet letter-ish to me. It seems punitive and for no good reason. You know, if people want that information, it's available in the meeting minutes. You've heard that already today. It's also available on the face of the contracts. Once an association completes a contract and it's executed, it becomes part of the records of that association, and every unit owner is entitled to see it. And if they were at meetings, they would have heard the discussion. If they weren't at meetings but chose to read the meeting minutes, they would have seen that discussion. So I don't know that that serves a real purpose other than a punitive one, or again, one that has a chilling effect. And my last point, and this is again on the entrance and exit signs, is that typically if there is signage of that nature at entrances and exits, it's typically to identify the entity that's providing the general property management to that property. And so if they start getting posted for every person who has a hand in everything, whether it's landscaping or snow plowing or what have you, I think what you're going to end up with, as far as that particular provision of the bill goes, is just confusion. I think that when people see all this contact information, they may wrongfully assume that those are the people to contact about any issue at the property. And so for something that's unnecessary, it seems like you'll have a likely negative result when there's confusion, because the unit owners can no longer clearly see who to call as far as general management versus, you know, every person who provides any one service is somehow having their name appear at the doorway. That's what we have to say about the bill, so I thank you for your time. And of course, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So if this were to pass, an owner with a business interest that owned 90% of the units could not vote to award the contract.
That's my understanding.
And that would leave 10% of the owners that were left that didn't have interest in the business awarding the contracts for the whole project.
Correct.
And that makes sense to you?
No.
Oh, okay, good, thanks.
No, it doesn't. And again, the way associations work, your budget is assessed to all the units on the basis of percentage of ownership. So in your example, if there were one person or entity who owned 90% of the association, then if the association's total budget for the year is $100,000, that individual or that one entity is going to be assessed $90,000 of the $100,000 that the association is going to use for the year. And so if you're paying $90,000 out of $100,000, it's hard for me to believe that you wouldn't have the community's best interest at heart. It just wouldn't make any sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have for speakers. Anyone else wishing to speak on Senate Bill 214? Seeing none, I will close the hearing and we're adjourned. Thursday, we will be voting on everything.
What time?
I don't know, what time did I set? 1? 9? 9, thanks. What's that? Just voting. Yeah, just voting. It's all